Roar! The monster had completely broken free from the void gate and appeared in the center of the battlefield. With a roar, the world shook. The surrounding experts looked at the monster in horror. What is this? What an evil aura! It's the first time I've seen such an evil aura. Is this also the work of Heavenly Sword Marquis? What method did he use? Exclamations sounded in the air. Is this the Yimo from the universe void? Jian Wushuang looked at the monster in horror. The 6 paths of reincarnation and the 3rd level of the Tao of Hell were all special attacks. The Hungry Ghost Path was a special summoning skill that could summon evil spirits for its own use. Of course, the evil spirits summoned by the Hungry Ghost Path could not be the evil spirits in the Samsara Hell. Instead, it summoned an extremely terrifying creature, the Yimo, which was active in the vast universe void. The Yimo. This name was very common in the Divine Beginning realm. Although the experts of the Divine Beginning realm had adventured in the universe battlefield, most of them only roamed around and had never really entered the deepest part of the universe. Yimo only existed in the deepest part of the universe, and it was very rare. Even those experts who roamed in the deepest part of the universe all year round rarely encountered it. Therefore, the Divine Beginning realm had never interacted with the Yimo. They did not know what the Yimo was. Jian Wushuang only learned about the existence of the Yimo after he mastered the Hungry Ghost Path. Moreover, the Yimo in the void of the universe was born for destruction. They were extremely evil, and their living desire was to destroy all living things they encountered. However, the Hungry Ghost Path could forcibly control a Yimo and pass through the void gate. It could summon it to the battlefield where it was and listen to its orders. For example, the Yimo that had struggled out of the void gate now completely listened to Jian Wushuang's orders. The Yimo is born for destruction and is extremely terrifying. I wonder how strong the Yimo that I have summoned through the Hungry Ghost Path is. Jian Wushuang had a trace of anticipation in his heart. He immediately pointed with his right hand and gave the order, "Kill him!" Roar! The Yimo immediately roared in response to Jian Wushuang's order. The next moment, whoosh! The huge body of the Yimo suddenly rushed out. It was such a huge body, but the surrounding spectators could not see it clearly. It was as if the Yimo had disappeared into thin air. It's too fast. What kind of speed is this? It's actually this fast? Countless experts widened their eyes. Even the Flame Saint Master was shocked by the speed that the Yimo had unleashed. This was because before he could react, the Yimo had already appeared before him. Furthermore, that sharp scarlet claw had already clawed at his head. An endless evil aura rushed over. The Flame Saint Master's body immediately surged with endless purple gold flames, crazily sweeping toward the Yimo in front of him. However, under the attack of the Yimo's claw, the purple gold flames immediately dissipated. The sharp claw was not hindered in the slightest, and continued to claw toward Flame Saint Master. Scram! Flame Saint Master let out a low growl, and the scarlet gold long rod in his hand fiercely smashed out. His shocking might instantly reached its peak. Dang! The scarlet gold long rod and the Yimo's sharp claw collided head-on. After a low collision sound, the Yimo's figure rolled backwards explosively, but Flame Saint Master himself also retreated continuously. Amazing! It's actually on par with Flame Saint Master? What kind of monster is this? How can it be so powerful? Is there such a terrifying monster in the Divine Beginning realm? The onlookers could not help exclaiming in surprise. Jian Wushuang's eyes also lit up. As expected of a Yimo born for destruction. The strength is really terrifying. It's not at all like Flame Saint Master. Moreover, the most terrifying thing about the Yimo is not its attack, but its speed. As expected, after a head-on clash, the Yimo's speed completely erupted. The huge body of the Yimo could be seen crazily moving about in the void. It clearly had such a huge body and should have been extremely eye-catching. However, when the body of the Yimo moved, the surrounding experts who were watching the battle, including those principals masters, none of them could see the body of the Yimo clearly. They could barely see a blood shadow moving freely in the void. While this blood shadow moved freely in the void, It also attacked the Flame Saint Master time and time again. The Yimo's attacking methods were very terrifying. It could not only rely on the sharp claws of its two hands to launch attacks. Its feet, its huge body, its mouth, its eyes, everything on its body. It could use deadly attacks. The Yimo that was born to destroy the world could not be compared to the beasts or fierce beasts in the divine beginning realm. Swish, 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 swish. The Yimo's body flashed and attacked crazily again and again. Each attack was extremely fast and violent, containing the power to destroy the world. Even the Flame Saint Master did not dare to resist the Yimo's attack. He could only try his best to resist. However, the Flame Saint Master could not keep up with the Yimo's speed at all. Facing the crazy attack of the Yimo, he could only defend himself, but he did not have any ability to counterattack. In just a moment, the Sacred Master of Fire was attacked by the Yimo. He was already in a terrible state. Bastard! Where did this monster come from? How could it be so terrifying? The Flame Saint Master gritted his teeth, and his face turned red. He was a Saint Realm Master, one of the strongest existences in the divine beginning realm, but in front of so many experts, how could he be suppressed by a monster from God knows where? Of course, this made him angry. However, no matter how angry he was, he had to admit that this monster's strength was too terrifying. In a one-on-one fight, he was indeed no match for this monster. Even this monster could not do anything to it, let alone kill Jian Wushuang. Damn it! Flame Saint Master cursed in his heart, but he suddenly retreated. While retreating, Flame Saint Master looked at the void beside him. Sorcerer God, how long do you plan to wait? Hurry up and lend me a hand. Flame Saint Master's voice echoed throughout the battlefield. Hearing this, all the experts present were stunned. Sorcerer God? Is it the sect master of the Sorcerer God sect? The sect master of the Sorcerer God sect is here too? Another wave of exclamations sounded on the battlefield. Jian Wushuang's pupils constricted. He immediately looked toward the void where Flame Saint Master was looking at. A dark figure slowly emerged, and at the same time, an extremely powerful aura began to spread. Gradually, it spread throughout the world. The person who came was an old man in a black robe. His face was gaunt as if he was just skin and bones. There was a pair of cold and strange pupils in his eye sockets that seemed to be about to sink in, and they were also emitting a faint green light. It was as if ghostly flames were dancing slowly, and a cold, strange, and evil aura spread out from his body. Anyone who met his gaze would shudder from the depths of their souls. The moment they saw the black-robed old man, the first thought that came to everyone's mind was fear and terror. And this black-robed old man was the infamous sect master of the Sorcerer God sect in the divine beginning realm, the Sorcerer God. The Sorcerer God commanded the Sorcerer God sect. In terms of overall strength, the Sorcerer God sect was not much weaker than one of the great saint realms. As the most powerful Sorcerer God in terms of individual strength, it had always been rumored that he was not inferior to the three great saint realm masters. However, this Sorcerer God was too mysterious and rarely fought personally, so no one knew exactly how strong he was. But now, this Sorcerer God had appeared in person. Although he had not fought yet, judging from the aura he emitted, his strength should not be weaker than the three Saint Realm Masters. Kiki, Flame Saint Master, we've known each other for so long, but this is the first time I've seen you being forced into such a sorry state. Moreover, you've been forced into such a sorry state by a little fellow at the Saint Realm. The black-robed old man Sorcerer God's gaze emitted a strange light as he looked at Flame Saint Master. A strange horse laugh also came out from his mouth. Humph, don't just stand there and say it like it's nothing. If you have the ability, why don't you come and exchange blows with this demon and see if your situation is much better than mine? Flame Saint Master snorted coldly. Sorcerer God raised his eyebrows and smiled. That's true. After all, the one you're facing is the most terrifying Yimo in the universe void. It's normal for it to be forced into such a sorry state. Yimo? Flame Saint Master immediately looked over. Sorcerer God, do you know the origin of this demon? I have heard of it, but this is also the first time I have seen it. It is just as the rumors say. Emo is purely born for destruction. Its speed is extremely fast and its offensive ability is extremely strong. Moreover, its self-healing and recovery ability is also the most terrifying. Even the weakest Emo is extremely powerful. There is only one way to kill a Emo, and that is to forcefully use a tyrannical attack to completely crush this Emo, not giving it a chance to heal itself. Sorcerer God's voice was deep. I don't know how Heavenly Sword Marquis managed to get a Emo to fight for him. However, the Emo he got hasn't reached that level yet. In addition, this is the divine beginning realm, so even a Emo would be suppressed by the power of the will of heaven. Its strength might not be able to reach its limit, so it's not impossible to kill it. As the Sorcerer God spoke, Jian Wushuang, who was not far away, narrowed his eyes. The Emo should have never interacted with the divine beginning realm. Almost no one in the divine beginning realm knew about the origin of the Emo, such as the three masters of the Saint Realm. However, the Sorcerer God knew about the origin of the Emo. Moreover, he knew about the innate advantages of the Emo, as well as its weaknesses, which surprised Jian Wushuang. Sorcerer God, since you know so much about this monster, it's easy to deal with it. Let's work together and kill this Emo first. Then we'll kill Heavenly Sword Marquis, said Flame Saint Master. Okay, but it's still what I said before. If there's a chance, it's best to keep the corpse of Heavenly Sword Marquis. If not, I'll force a few drops of essence blood out of his body, said Sorcerer God. As long as Heavenly Sword Marquis is dead, whether we can keep his corpse or refine essence blood will depend on your own ability, Flame Saint Master said. Haha, then let's do it. The Sorcerer God laughed and moved directly. He did not immediately attack Jian Wushuang, but directly went to find the Emo. Roar! The Emo let out a terrifying roar. It had received Jian Wushuang's order to tear the Flame Saint Master and the Sorcerer God into pieces. Therefore, when the Sorcerer God approached it, it turned around and clawed at it. This claw easily tore apart heaven and earth. Haha! I'd like to see how powerful the legendary Emo is. The Sorcerer God laughed loudly. Facing the sharp claws of the Emo, he had no intention of dodging. He let the Emo's sharp claws pass by him. Swish! The sharp claws did not touch any substance. The Sorcerer God's body began to transform. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen figures of the Sorcerer God appeared around the Emo. Each figure seemed to be real. Even Jian Wushuang could not tell which of these figures was the Sorcerer God's original body. As for the Emo, it was completely enraged by the Sorcerer God. It roared crazily and attacked the figures of the Sorcerer God, but none of the attacks actually hit the Sorcerer God's original body. Kiki, it's just as the rumors say. Although the Emo is powerful, its intelligence is very low. The Sorcerer God shook his head and laughed. Suddenly, among the dozens of figures formed by the Sorcerer God, one of the figures behind the Emo suddenly stretched out his hand. A sharp spear that carried a gloomy and cold aura pierced into the Emo's body and directly pierced out from the other end of the Emo's body. After being pierced by the spear, the intense pain made the Emo more angry and irritable, and it became crazier and crazier. However, the onlookers noticed that although the Emo became crazier, its speed actually began to slow down. Yes, it became slower. Logically speaking, the crazier the Emo was, the stronger and faster it would be. However, it was obviously not like that now. No, that spear just now was not that simple. Jian Wushuang frowned. He had already guessed the reason. Is it poison? Haha, my ability to fight head-on is not very strong. However, no one in the divine beginning realm can match me in using poison. The blood voodoo poison that I personally refined is the pride of my life. If it was an adult Emo with peak strength, it might be able to ignore my blood voodoo poison. However, this Emo clearly has not reached such a level. The Sorcerer God sneered. The Sorcerer God sect was famous for all kinds of strange and cold methods. When it came to using poison, the Sorcerer God sect was also famous in the divine beginning realm. The Sorcerer God was the patriarch of the Sorcerer God sect. When it came to using poison, perhaps no one in the divine beginning realm could compare to him. His spear just now seemed to have simply pierced through the body of the Emo. The Yimo had already used its self-healing ability to repair itself, but the blood voodoo poison had already been left in the Yimo's body. There was no doubt that the Yimo was very terrifying. Whether it was its killing methods, speed, and self-healing ability, it was very terrifying. Except for its low intelligence, it had almost no weaknesses. However, the Yimo that Jian Wushuang had summoned through the Hungry Ghost Path was not at its peak. Its strength had not yet reached its peak, and it was not so invulnerable. Now, it was being corroded by the sorcerer god's blood voodoo poison. The internal part of the Yimo's body was greatly affected. Its strength and speed were greatly weakened. As time passed, the weakening continued to increase. Originally, the Yimo that Jian Wushuang had summoned could suppress the Flame Saint Master head-on. However, under the continuous corrosion of the blood voodoo poison, it could no longer keep up with the Flame Saint Master's speed. In addition, the sorcerer god was also attacking from the side. The Yimo was completely crushed. If its self-healing ability had not been greatly affected, the Yimo would have probably been killed by the Flame Saint Master's powerful attack. This Yimo no longer has any battle strength. Jian Wushuang sighed lightly and then waved his hand. In the void next to the Yimo, the void gate appeared again, and the Yimo received Jian Wushuang's order. It rushed toward the void gate and wanted to leave the battlefield. You want to leave? The sorcerer god's pupils shrank when he saw this. It's not easy to meet a Yimo. How can I let you leave so easily? The sorcerer god's speed reached its peak. Before the Yimo was about to step into the void gate, the long spear in his hand burst out with endless dark light. It directly stabbed the Yimo's arm and then slashed with force. One of the Yimo's sharp claws was actually torn off by him. After which, the sorcerer god waved his hand and kept the sharp claw into his interspatial ring. Although the Yimo had lost a claw, its body was not obstructed. It still rushed into the void gate. It disappeared along with the void gate. Sorcerer god, are you interested in this monster? Flame Saint Master stood beside the sorcerer god and could not help but ask. Haha, it's rare to meet a mantis demon, so I left a claw as a memento, the sorcerer god said casually. It seemed that he really did it casually, and Flame Saint Master did not ask too much. Well, this mantis demon has been dealt with. Next, it's Heavenly Sword Marquis's turn. Flame Saint Master's eyes flashed with strong killing intent. The sorcerer god stared at Jian Wushuang with a strange light. Kill! Flame Saint Master shouted. The purplish-gold flames covering his body formed a huge purplish-gold sea of fire and surged toward Jian Wushuang. Flame Saint Master's aura also reached its peak. He held the long scarlet gold staff in one hand and charged toward Jian Wushuang. As for the sorcerer god, he moved slightly and silently approached Jian Wushuang. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's face darkened slightly. After using the 9-region seal, the frigid hell, and the lonely hell consecutively, more than half of the power that Elder Bloodwave gave me has been consumed. Now, I have to face both Flame Saint Master and the sorcerer god at the same time. I have no choice but to use the last move. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands. In the sky above, the huge scroll world shook slightly as if it was responding to Jian Wushuang. Mountain River Map. 9-Dragon Heaven-Killing Formation. Open. Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed with a sharp light. The remaining power in his body had been used up by 1/3 at this moment. Boom! The world shook violently. In the scroll world above, the 9 huge continents in the scroll world were bursting with dazzling golden light. These 9 continents were the vast 9 regions that existed within the Mountain River Map. 9 regions were originally the 9 worlds of outstanding people, but later on, they were forcefully refined and placed into the Mountain River Map. Not only were these 9 regions vast and tyrannical, but most importantly, each of the 9 regions had already formed a dragon spirit. The 9 dragon spirits and the 9 regions had always been trapped within the Mountain River Map. The Mountain River Map was a top-tier universal treasure, and the secret skill contained in it was extremely powerful. From the beginning of the 9 provinces seal to the 1,000 treasures great world, they were all unique and powerful secret skills. However, Jian Wushuang had come into contact with the 9 provinces seal and the 1,000 treasures great world a long time ago. Although he had not been able to unleash the true power of these two secret skills, at least he could use them through the Mountain River map. However, the Mountain River map did not contain only these two secret skills. On the contrary, the 9-region seal and the 1,000 treasures great world were the two simpler secret skills in the Mountain River map, and the threshold for cultivating these two secret skills was not high. However, there were more powerful secret skills in the Mountain River map that required a very high threshold to cultivate. This secret skill was the formation contained in the Mountain River map, the 9-dragon heaven-killing formation. This was the most terrifying killing move of the map. It was much more terrifying than the 9-region seal and the 1,000 treasures great world. Jian Wushuang was too weak before and had not been able to master this move. It was not until his strength improved greatly in the Blood Wave realm that he finally reached the threshold to cultivate this secret skill. Therefore, when he knew that there was an inescapable net outside the Blood Wave realm, he deliberately found Blood Wave and asked him to delay it for 3 days. During these 3 days, he had been focused on researching this killing move, and in these 3 days he had successfully grasped this move. And now, with the help of Blood Wave, he temporarily possessed the power of a ruler, and he could fully unleash the power of this move. Roar! A dragon's roar suddenly sounded from the scroll world in the 9 heavens. The sound shook the heaven and earth. The countless experts present, including Flame Saint Master and Sorcerer God, all raised their heads and looked up. They could see that among the 9 continents that were emitting golden light in the scroll world above, the golden light that erupted from one of the continents was the most dazzling. And under everyone's gaze, this towering continent also began to slowly materialize. This continent seemed to have come to life completely. It was originally a huge and majestic continent, but in a moment, it actually slowly turned into a huge object. This was a dragon, a 5-clawed golden dragon with a body that was hundreds of thousands of feet long and covered in golden scales. It had a noble and majestic body, and it also had a life aura that surpassed all living creatures. It appeared from the scroll world and directly descended into the world. 9-dragon heaven-killing formation. 9 dragon spirits that had been transformed from the 9 regions had now descended. 1 dragon heaven-killing formation. Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed with killing intent, and the 10,000-meter golden dragon that had descended into the world instantly attacked. Hong! The 5-clawed golden dragon moved, and as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting, its terrifying power directly pressed down on Flame, Saint Master, and Sorcerer God. The dozens of figures that Sorcerer God had transformed into had always existed even though the Yimo had already entered the gate of void space. However, at this moment, it was only the moment when the golden dragon's power pressed down on them. The figures immediately dissipated. Be careful. This is the terrifying secret skill, 9 dragons heaven-killing formation, which is carried by the top-tier universe treasure, the Mountain River map. I've experienced the power of this secret skill before. It's very terrifying, Flame Saint Master reminded. During the world-ending war countless years ago, Xianxia had used the 9 dragons heaven-killing formation to kill everyone with the Mountain River map. However, Xianxia had driven 6 golden dragons from the map at that time. 6 golden dragons were enough to destroy the world. Jian Wushuang had only driven 1 golden dragon, which was not as powerful as Xianxia, but it was still very powerful. Let's attack together. Endless purple gold flames burst out of Flame Saint Master's body, and his divine body rose to a height of 100 feet. He had completely turned into a purple gold flame war god. He held the long scarlet gold staff in both hands and raised it high. At the instant he raised it, a terrifying might immediately began to gather crazily, and in the blink of an eye, it had already gathered to its peak. As for the sorcerer god, he was skilled in using poison and all sorts of underhanded methods, but a head-on confrontation was not something he was good at. However, he still held the long spear in his hands tightly, and an endless icy aura gathered within the long spear. It made the long spear seem as if it had turned into a dark star. At the instant that the 100,000 feet tall golden dragon attacked, the Flame Sacred Master's golden red long rod and the Sorcerer God's long spear that seemed to have turned into a dark star immediately attacked. Bang! The huge golden-red long rod directly smashed toward the golden dragon's head, and the long spear that looked like a dark star directly pierced towards the golden dragon's neck. Bang! Bang! Two deafening sounds were heard in succession. Although the mighty power of the 30,000-meter golden dragon was earth-shaking, it could not withstand the powerful attacks of the two masters of the Saint Realm. It collapsed at this moment, and the overwhelming power spread wildly in all directions. The golden dragon collapsed, but the Flame Saint Master and the Sorcerer God were not any better. Both of them were hit by the terrifying impact of the golden dragon, and they staggered and retreated crazily, especially the Sorcerer God, who was not good at head-on collisions. He looked even more miserable. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted secretly. After all, I haven't mastered the nine-dragon heaven-killing formation for a long time, and I'm not very familiar with the use of the dragon spirit. If I could have more time before this battle and get more familiar with it, my use of the dragon spirit would definitely be 70 to 80% stronger than it is now. Jian Wushuang was helpless about this. In the Blood Wave realm, he had asked Blood Wave to buy him 3 days to barely master the move of the nine-dragon heaven-killing formation. However, he had only mastered it in the beginning and had not had the time to really practice it. It was his first time awakening the dragon spirit in the Mountain River map, so his use of the dragon spirit was very shallow, and he could not fully exert the strength of the dragon spirit. In addition, although I have the power of a ruler, I can't use it by myself. Plus, the backlash from the power is so strong that I can't use it well. Otherwise, the dragon spirit will be stronger. Jian Wushuang sighed. The nine-dragon heaven-killing formation was the real killer move in the map. Its power was earth-shaking, but it was far from the standard of his master. After all, his master relied on his own strength to sweep the world. I just used up a lot of the power given by Elder Blood Wave. Now I only have 20% of my remaining power. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. 20% of my power is not enough for me to use any more tricks. I have to fight to the death. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang suddenly raised his head and poured all of his remaining power, including 99% of his divine power, into the Mountain River map. At this moment, the golden light on the 9 continents, which had gradually dimmed, became dazzling again. Buzz! Buzz! Heaven and earth shook, and 2 towering continents in the scroll world began to transform at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the 2 towering continents transformed into 2 golden dragons. The golden 5-clawed dragon, which was also 30,000 meters tall, also had an earth-shaking and terrifying power. The 2 golden dragons that had transformed were even stronger than the golden dragon that Jian Wushuang had transformed into earlier. Their power was even stronger. After all, this was the first time Jian Wushuang had awakened the dragon spirit, so he was not very familiar with controlling it. However, this was the second time he had awakened the dragon spirit. Although he was still not very familiar with it, it was definitely slightly stronger than before. Under the shocked gazes of the surrounding experts, the 2 30,000-meter tall golden dragons slowly emerged from the scroll world. The 2 terrifying powers pressed down on everyone present. Upon seeing the 2 30,000-meter tall golden dragons, the expressions of Flame Saint Master and Sorcerer God became extremely solemn. This kid can actually use 2 dragons to kill the heavens? Flame Saint Master narrowed his eyes slightly. Just now, just 1 golden dragon was enough to put so much pressure on us. Now, there are 2 golden dragons, and both of them are much stronger than the previous one. Flame Saint Master, are you confident in blocking this attack? Sorcerer God looked at Flame Saint Master. Flame Saint Master did not answer. Obviously, he was not confident. 2 dragons killing the heaven is the limit of my ability. Flame Saint Master, Sorcerer God, I'd like to see if you 2 can still withstand it. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold, but he suddenly waved his hand. Go! Boom! The world trembled, and the 2 30,000-meter-long golden dragons instantly burst out under Jian Wushuang's guidance. 2 terrifying forces pressed down crazily. In front of these 2 forces, any power seemed so weak and insignificant. Faced with these golden dragons, both the Flame Saint Master and the Sorcerer God could only try their best to resist. The Flame Saint Master held the long golden stick in his hands at the same time and used his most powerful stick. The Sorcerer God's spear turned into a dark meteor this time and shot out with terrifying penetrating power. In the blink of an eye, the two sides collided. Boom! Terrifying booms sounded like continuous waves, resounding in the ears of many experts. The countless experts watching the battle, including the principal's masters with different strengths, were all shocked by the scene in front of them. The two golden dragons clashed with the strongest attacks of Flame Saint Master and Sorcerer God. Such a collision was rarely seen in billions of years. Look! Look over there. Space wormhole. What a big space wormhole. This should be more than 10,000 meters, right? Everyone was dumbstruck as they looked at the space wormhole with a diameter of more than 10,000 meters that appeared in the center. In the divine beginning realm, the space that was the most stable directly blasted out a space wormhole with a diameter of more than 10,000 meters. What kind of concept was this? To put it bluntly, even if it was a head-on battle between masters of the Saint Realm, it would be difficult to create such a big scene in the early stage. Although Jian Wushuang was only an immortal saint, the astonishing power he displayed now completely exceeded everyone's understanding. Rumble. The terrifying power finally began to weaken. A large amount of power formed a shock wave and began to spread out in the surroundings. Although the spectating experts were extremely far away from this battlefield, at this moment, they were still knocked about by the shock wave. Only the law masters could barely stand. This is the might of a Saint Realm Master, a ruler. Elder Darkbones stood together with the experts from the Temporal Temple. But at this moment, even he could not help but exclaim in admiration. Although he was the most powerful principal's master, he could even fight against a master of the Saint Realm. But he could barely hold on for a moment. Once the master of the Saint Realm unleashed his full strength, he would be crushed and could only think of ways to save his life. The battle in front of him was beyond his control. Whether it was the Flame Saint Master, the Sorcerer God, or Jian Wushuang, who had used some unknown method to unleash his monstrous battle strength, they were far beyond his reach. Especially Jian Wushuang. He can fight against two masters of the Saint Realm at the same time. This heavenly sword Marquis. Elder Darkbones sighed secretly. Soon, the power in the center of the battlefield completely dissipated, and the scene in the void was gradually revealed to everyone. Seeing the scene in the void, the countless experts watching the battle were all stunned. Jian Wushuang, the Flame Saint Master, and the Sorcerer God were still standing in the void. Jian Wushuang's face was pale, without a trace of blood. His aura was extremely weak, as if it would be completely cut off at any time from his body at all. The audience could understand Jian Wushuang's current state. After all, when Jian Wushuang used two dragons to kill heaven, they could see that he had reached his limit. He had used almost all of his strength to use this move. After using it, he would definitely fall into weakness. He would no longer have any battle strength. Therefore, Jian Wushuang's current state was very normal. The ones who truly shocked everyone present were the Flame Saint Master and the Sorcerer God. These two people. First, they looked at the Flame Saint Master. The Flame Saint Master had already returned to his normal size. His body was still covered in a layer of purple gold flames, but this layer of purple gold flames was much dimmer than before. The Flame Saint Master's face was also quite pale. There was still a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Clearly, Flame Saint Master had been injured by the impact of the two 100,000 feet tall golden dragons during the collision just now. Moreover, judging from the aura on his body that was much weaker than before, his injuries were not light. Looking at the Sorcerer God, who was not good at head-on collisions, his injuries were clearly even more severe than Flame Saint Master's. The Sorcerer God's withered and old face was now twisted together. The corner of his mouth and the black robe on his body was covered in blood, and the strange airflow around him had also been completely restrained. He was still standing in the void. However, his body was slightly trembling. As for the aura on his body, it was at least half weaker than before. I injured. The Flame Saint Master and the Sorcerer God, these two supreme existences, are actually injured? Two great Saint Realm Masters working together were actually injured by an immortal Saint head-on, and both of them were heavily injured. How is this possible? Not only did he fight against two Saint Realm Masters with his own strength, but he even heavily injured two Saint Realm Masters. Is this heavenly sword Marquis even human? Shocked, and incredulous voices were heard from the crowd. Even the principal's masters from the two camps looked at each other in disbelief. This little fellow actually injured Flame Saint Master and Sorcerer God? Temple Master Bai Xing sucked in a breath of cold air. Unbelievable. Simply unbelievable, Batsong said in a low voice. This little fellow is indeed a little too abnormal. Lin Guang Master added. On the other two battlefields, Life and Death Saint Master, the four ancient immortals and Destruction Saint Master, who was still engaged in a fierce battle with the consciousness avatar of the Heaven-Cleaving Alliance Master, also saw this scene. Huge waves of emotions surged in their hearts. This kid is too abnormal. If he doesn't think about it today, it's almost impossible for us three Saint Realms to kill him in the future. Life and Death Saint Master changed from his usual gentle face to a cold one. Heavenly Sword Marquis has used up all of his divine power and is now at the end of his life. This is the best time to kill him. Flame Saint Master, Sorcerer God. Why don't you two hurry up and do it? Destruction Saint Master immediately urged. As Destruction Saint Master had said, Jian Wushuang was already at the end of his rope. Although Flame Saint Master and Sorcerer God had been severely injured by Jian Wushuang's two dragons killing the heaven, they were still able to retain their battle strength. At this time, they would certainly not let go of the opportunity to kill Jian Wushuang. Boy, die! The Flame Saint Master did not hesitate at all. The scarlet gold long staff in his hand carried an earth-shaking power as he furiously attacked Jian Wushuang. Flame Saint Master, try to keep his body as long as possible. The Sorcerer God also immediately attacked. However, the Sorcerer God only used poison. It was obvious that he did not want to hurt Jian Wushuang's divine body. Faced with the attacks of the two masters of the Saint Realm, Jian Wushuang indeed did not have any strength to resist at this moment. However, at this moment Jian Wushuang smiled. His smile was a little strange. Although his consciousness was in a blurry state due to the crazy backlash from the previous power, he still saw the silver-haired old man who appeared out of nowhere behind Flame Saint Master and Sorcerer God. The silver-haired old man also slowly extended his finger. Halt! A deep voice suddenly sounded in the vast world. All the experts present heard this voice. In the next moment, the entire space-time froze, and the experts present all fell into a frozen state. It must be known that because more and more experts participated in this battle, and their strength became more and more terrifying, the area of this battle was incomparably vast, and the spectators were quite far away from the battlefield. But at this moment, the already vast battlefield, in addition to the large area of spacetime around the battlefield, all sank into a state of stagnation. All the immortal saints and principals masters who were watching the battle were motionless at this moment. As for Flame Saint Master and Sorcerer God, who were attacking Jian Wushuang, they suddenly stopped in the void. This is... Flame Saint Master's body trembled slightly. As a Saint Realm Master, he was still able to keep his thoughts under the time-space freeze. Although his body was greatly hindered, he could still move. As for the Sorcerer God, Life and Death Saint Master, and Destruction Saint Master, they were naturally not too affected. However, when they sensed the space-time freezing, they knew that that person had already rushed to the battlefield. Temporal Temple Master? Life and Death Saint Master could not be bothered to deal with the four ancient immortals in front of him. Instead, he turned his head to look at the silver-haired old man. This is troublesome. The Destruction Saint Master's expression sank. Temple Master. The four ancient immortals within the golden-armored puppet were not affected by the space-time freeze. They instantly saw the existence of the silver-haired old man and were overjoyed. Space-time, you came at the right time. If you hadn't come, I wouldn't have been able to protect that little fellow. An indifferent voice came from the consciousness clone of the Heaven-Cleaving Alliance Master. The consciousness clone of the leader of the Heaven-Cleaving Alliance had been fighting with the Destruction Saint Master, but it was just a clone after all. During the battle, his divine power was constantly dissipating. Now, this consciousness clone was on the verge of dissipating. Heaven-cleaving alliance. Thank you very much this time. The Temporal Temple Master glanced at the consciousness clone of the leader of the Heaven-cleaving alliance. I'm only helping that little guy. I never thought of helping your temporal temple. Don't flatter yourself. The consciousness avatar of the Heaven-cleaving alliance master sneered. All right, since your original body is here in person, I won't care about what happens next. Clean up this mess yourself. After the Heaven-cleaving alliance master finished speaking, his body shook and his consciousness avatar disappeared from this world. After the Heaven-cleaving alliance master left, the temporal temple master looked at the 3 Saint Realm masters. The 3 Saint Realms and Sorcerer God sect. I have been wandering in the universe battlefield for millions of years, and I haven't come back. Now that I have come back, I see this scene. It seems that you 3 Saint Realms have taken care of my temporal temple during my absence. Although the temporal temple master had a smile on his face, however, there was a trace of coldness in his smile. The 3 masters of the Saint Realm and the Sorcerer God had gathered together, and the 3 masters of the Saint Realm looked quite upset. Although Temporal Temple Master is at the ruler level, he is still in the divine beginning realm. He is more or less limited by the power of the will of heaven. His battle strength is probably equal to ours. Now that the consciousness avatar of the Heaven-cleaving alliance master has disappeared, the 4 of us working together can completely ignore Temporal Temple Master. The Sorcerer God secretly transmitted his voice. He was still greedy for Jian Wushuang's divine body and the blood essence in his body. Humph. It's not as simple as you think. Flame Saint Master replied in a low voice. Although Temporal Temple Master is not much stronger than us in the divine beginning realm, his use of time and space is beyond our imagination. With him in front of us, there's nothing we can do, right? The 3 of us have already experienced how difficult the Temporal Temple Master is to deal with. If he is willing, he can completely not fight with the 3 of us. He can just use his time and space technique to fool the 3 of us. He can even use his time and space technique to send us to several different time and space. And he can enter any time and space to fight us one-on-one. We are definitely not his match. Life and Death Saint Master said. Any one of the 3 strongest rulers of the divine beginning realm is extremely terrifying. The Heaven-cleaving alliance master is extremely powerful, and his consciousness avatar alone is enough to fight against any one of us. If his true body were here, he would be able to fight against all 3 of us at the same time. The Temporal Temple Master's use of time and space is extremely strange. As for the Heavenly Ancestor, his methods are also unfathomable. Since any of their true bodies are here and they want to protect Heavenly Sword Marquis, there's nothing we can do, the Destruction God said in a low voice. The 3 masters of the Saint Realm were also helpless at this moment. If other experts were here, they would not care too much. But now it was Temporal Temple Master's original body. Temporal Temple Master was not only extremely powerful, but he also relied on his own strength to become a ruler. Most importantly, Temporal Temple Master's use of time and space was so powerful that it had reached an incredible level. Since Temporal Temple Master was present, it was absolutely impossible for them to continue fighting. It was also impossible for them to kill Jian Wushuang. Even though Jian Wushuang's consciousness had already fallen into a faint state, he was completely unable to resist. In other words, the 3 Saint Realm Masters had set up such an inescapable net and arranged so many means. Even the 3 of them, as well as the Sorcerer God, had personally attacked 4 Saint Realm Masters. However, they still failed to kill Jian Wushuang. This made the 3 Masters of the Saint Realm feel aggrieved and ashamed. However, no matter how aggrieved they were, they could do nothing against the Temporal Temple Master. Temporal Temple Master, with your experience, you should know that killing this little guy was not our intention. The Life and Death Saint Master looked at the Temporal Temple Master. Of course, I know this. The 3 of you are just its lackeys. The Temporal Temple Master sneered. Lackeys? This title made the 3 Saint Realm Masters' faces even more unsightly. but they did not refute it. The life and death Saint Master continued. Since you know our intention, you should be clear that this little guy cannot be kept. You'd better not protect him. Don't forget that the world-ending war was the best example. However, the one who disappeared in the last war was the 7-star mysterious sect, and this time it might be the temporal temple. The life and death Saint Master's voice was cold, and the threat in his words was obvious. Are you trying to scare me? The temporal temple master glanced at the life and death Saint Master. I don't dare. I'm just stating the facts. Although your temporal temple is strong, it shouldn't be comparable to the invincible Overlord 7-star mysterious sect, right? The life and death Saint Master said coldly. It can't be compared to them. However, our temporal temple has some methods that the 7-star mysterious sect couldn't compare to. It's even better. If we want to recreate the world-ending war, we have to see if it still has the ability and courage. The temporal temple Saint Master said mockingly. Life and death Saint Master, destruction Saint Master, flame Saint Master, and sorcerer God. I'll remember what happened today. I'll come back to settle the score with you guys in the future. We'll be waiting for you at any time. The 3 Saint Masters were not afraid at all. Although they could not do anything to the temporal temple master, the temporal temple master could not do anything to the 3 of them in the divine beginning realm. However, the sorcerer god's expression changed slightly, but he did not say anything. Bai Xing. The temporal temple master glanced at the void next to him. That void was where the experts of the temporal temple gathered. While the entire world was in a state of space-time stagnation, this void was not affected at all. The experts of the temporal temple had been keeping a clear mind and were able to move freely. Hearing temporal temple master's call, Temple Master Bai Xing immediately went forward and said, "Temple Master, take the little guy and let's go." Temporal temple master said, "Yes." Temple Master Bai Xing immediately stepped forward and took Jian Wushuang, who had fallen into a coma. With a wave of temporal temple master's hand, a space passage appeared out of thin air. Many experts of the temporal temple directly stepped into the space passage and disappeared. As for temporal temple master, he had also stepped into the space passage with half a foot, but he suddenly withdrew his foot. I almost forgot something. Temporal temple master looked around and waved his hand. Show! A streak of light rushed toward him at an incredible speed, and in the blink of an eye, it landed in his hand. On a closer look, it was a purple-gold command flag. It was the golden flag of painting sky. Temporal temple master had a golden flag of painting sky, and the one that flew into his hand was green rock master's. The golden sky painting flag is a true treasure in the field of time and space. It's better for the palace to keep it. Temporal temple master smiled and wiped green rock master's consciousness from the golden sky painting flag. Then, he put it into his interspatial ring. After that, temporal temple master stepped into the space tunnel again. The 3 Saint Realm Masters and Sorcerer God watched the space tunnel slowly shrink, but they did not want to stop it at all. After the temporal temple master left, the world that had been frozen in time and space finally began to flow again. The many experts in this world also regained their consciousness. However, after they regained their consciousness, they were all at a loss. What happened? What happened just now? What about Heavenly Sword Marquis? Where did the experts of the temporal temple go? There are no experts from the temporal temple. What's going on? The experts who were stuck in the state of time-space stagnation had their consciousness completely cut off. They had no idea what had just happened. They did not even know that they had been stuck in the state of time-space stagnation and that their consciousness had been suspended for a period of time. But very quickly they reacted. It's time freeze. All of us fell into a time freeze just now, and our consciousness fell into a time freeze. Time freeze? Making all of us fall into a time freeze? How is this possible? Who cast time freeze? Everyone was still a little dazed. But at this time, Elder Darkbone frowned. He said solemnly, "Space-time stagnation is a technique that can only be used after one has grasped the principles of space-time to a certain extent. However, the area that this technique can cover and the degree of influence it can have on an expert depends on this person's strength. And if we want space-time stagnation to completely cover our current world and cause all of us to fall into space-time stagnation, this person's use of space-time must definitely reach the peak of perfection. And in the entire divine beginning realm, there is only one person who has such attainments in space-time, and that is the Temporal Temple Master. Temporal Temple Master? Temporal Temple Master? The Temporal Temple Master just came? Everyone cried out in surprise, but they soon understood. Indeed, under the situation just now, only Temporal Temple Master could completely turn the situation around, while everyone was in a daze. Let's leave together with the experts of the Temporal Temple and Jian Wushuang. Temporal Temple Master, his use of spacetime is getting more and more profound. Even I can't avoid the spacetime stagnation. Elder Dark Bone sighed quietly. He could at least tangle with a Saint Realm Master, but he had also fallen into the spacetime stagnation just now. To be able to resist the spacetime stagnation of Temporal Temple Master, one must at least have the battle strength of a Saint Realm Master. That Heavenly Sword Marquis and the experts of the Temporal Temple have already left with the Temporal Temple Master. So, this battle should end here, right? A Principal's Master suddenly said. His words caused the surrounding experts to agree with him. It should be over. The battle is finally over. This battle, although the two sides haven't fought to a true victory or defeat, this process is really soul-stirring. Countless experts were sighing and praising the earth-shattering battle just now. This battle's level was too high, and there were too many peak experts participating in it. It was fine if they were ordinary masters of laws, but experts at the 6th stage of the Void Realm like Elder Darkbone and the 4 ancient immortals were rarely seen on normal days, not to mention the 3 great Saint Realm Masters, Sorcerer God, and the consciousness clone of the Heaven-Cleaving Alliance Master, as well as the Temporal Temple Master. In short, this battle was earth-shattering. At the same time, the one who shocked all the experts present was Jian Wushuang. That person was Jian Wushuang. He was just an immortal saint, but he had attracted so many experts from the 3 saint realms, the Sorcerer God sect, and the 9-tailed clan to hunt him down. After a fierce battle, so many top experts still failed to kill him, especially when Jian Wushuang controlled the power given by Blood Wave and directly fought against the Flame Saint Master and the Sorcerer God. It was even more shocking. After all, the Flame Saint Master and the Sorcerer God, 2 masters of the Saint Realm, were seriously injured by Jian Wushuang. Who would have thought that a mere immortal saint could reach such a level? Without a doubt, after this battle, no matter what happened next, Jian Wushuang was bound to become a true legend in the divine beginning realm. On Saha Island, that shocking battle had finally come to an end. The process and result of this battle were personally witnessed by many top experts. It spread like a violent storm across the entire divine beginning realm. The entire divine beginning realm was shaken by this battle. There were even people who specially named this battle the Battle of the Heavenly Sword Marquis. This was because the true protagonist of this battle was Heavenly Sword Marquis. Moreover, this Heavenly Sword Marquis was the most dazzling person in this battle. He was the most incredible existence. He refreshed the understanding of all experts toward the immortal saint. No one had ever thought that an immortal saint could be this powerful. However, although the heat of the battle had lasted for a long time, it gradually subsided as time went by. The divine beginning realm also regained its calm. In a flash, 20 years had passed since the end of the battle. On Saha Island, a large amount of gray airflow surrounded the independent spacetime, covering every corner of this spacetime. In the center of this spacetime, Jian Wushuang's consciousness finally began to slowly wake up. What am I? Jian Wushuang lay on a black crystal that emitted a strange aura, and his eyes had already opened to look around. He wanted to stand up at once, but a feeling of powerlessness immediately arose in his body. His body moved and he was in extreme pain. As for his divine power, he did not have any left, just like an ordinary person. "Little guy, you're awake." A calm and gentle voice came from the side. Jian Wushuang immediately saw the silver-haired elder standing beside the black crystal. "Greetings, Temple Master." Jian Wushuang could only speak, but he could not stand up and bow. "Since you can see my identity at a glance, It seems that your consciousness has not been affected, Temporal Temple Master said. How long have I been in a coma? Jian Wushuang asked. He remembered that he had used up all the power that Bloodwave had given him during the battle, including 99% of his divine power. Then that power had rebounded crazily, causing his consciousness to fall into a coma. What happened next was completely unknown to him. It hasn't been long, just 20 years, the Temporal Temple Master said. 20 years. Jian Wushuang was stunned. But then he smiled bitterly. I've been in a coma for 20 years, and it will take more time for my body to recover to its peak condition. Little guy, just be content. Temporal Temple Master smiled. Don't forget that, in the previous battle, you were forcibly imbued with a power comparable to that of a ruler. That level of power was only yours. If it had been any other cultivator, it would have been some clan experts with powerful divine bodies, or even some ordinary special life forms. The principles would have been that they would have been forced to explode, and they would have died without a doubt. Although your injury is very serious and you need a long time to recover, at least your life is saved, and it won't affect your overall foundation and consciousness. This is the best result. What else are you not satisfied with? Jian Wushuang was stunned, and then he smiled helplessly. Indeed, before Bloodwave gave him the power, he had told him about the risks he had to take to obtain the power. The risks were too great. Ordinary cultivators and even some lower-level special life forms could not withstand the power at all and could only be stuffed to death. However, because he was a perfect level life form, he forcefully endured it. He just needed some time to recover. Of course, he was much better. The power of a ruler. Jian Wushuang still recalled the power he had in that battle. That power was so strong that it could make one's hair stand on end. Unfortunately, that power doesn't really belong to me. Jian Wushuang could not help sighing. What's a pity? With your potential and talent, it won't be difficult for you to have the power of a ruler in the future. Temporal Temple Master looked over. Jian Wushuang smiled. Then he said, Temple Master, I've been curious about what the ruler level is. How can you reach the ruler level? And how can the three masters of the divine realm in the divine beginning realm compare to the ruler level? Jian Wushuang knew that above the principal's master was the ruler level. However, he was very unfamiliar with the ruler level. He did not know how to be considered a ruler level. The ruler level is just a short name. The true name of this level is the ruler of chaos. As the name implies, the ruler of chaos is the ruler of a primal chaos world. It can also be said to be the ruler of the primal chaos world. For example, our divine beginning realm is a complete primal chaos world. And the ruler of chaos is equivalent to the strongest overlord in this primal chaos world. It can be said that he is the strongest existence in this world. Even in the vast universe, the ruler level is a true expert, enough to dominate the universe. As for how to become a ruler level, as well as the difference between a ruler level and a principal's master, it's actually very easy to understand. The Temporal Temple Master patiently explained. Little fellow, you've been in the third sky for quite some time already, and the level you've come into contact with is also very high. You should already understand the level division between principal's masters. From the first level of the void to the 6 levels of the void, these 6 levels are all determined by the willpower they control. For example, the 6 levels of the void have 6 portions of the willpower. Most experts who have reached the 6th realm of the void have already fused 3 rules. Compared to the principal's masters of the 6th realm of the void, a ruler-level expert only needs to fuse 4 principles. You can become a chaos ruler by fusing 4 rules? Jian Wushuang was stunned. He clearly felt that this process was too simple. Little guy, you may think that it's easy to fuse 4 principles, but it's actually very difficult. It's very difficult to fuse principles. The more principles you fuse, the more difficult it will be. For example, if a principle's master has finally fused 2 principles, the difficulty of fusing the 3rd rule will be tens to hundreds of times more difficult than fusing 2 principles. As for fusing 4 principles, it's tens to hundreds of times more difficult than fusing 3 principles. It's thousands to tens of thousands of times more difficult than fusing 2 principles. Do you understand the concept? Temporal Temple Master looked at Jian Wushuang with a smile. Jian Wushuang was a little dumbfounded. Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands of times harder? Jian Wushuang was also shocked by the number. He has now begun to deal with the fusion of the principles, but he is now only delving into the space-time and reincarnation of the two principles fusion. But even if it was just the fusion of two principles, it was still extremely difficult in his eyes. Even if, because of the opportunity within the Blood Wave Temple, he had already reached the threshold of the fusion of these two principles, but he wanted to completely fuse them successfully, he still needed a certain amount of fortuitous encounters and a large amount of time. This was also because he had obtained the fortuitous encounters in Blood Wave Temple to begin with. In addition, his comprehension ability was exceptionally high. However, to ordinary cultivators, fusing the two principles was already as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Of the many principles masters in the divine beginning realm, there were very few who had truly fused the principles. Moreover, the reason why they were able to fuse the principles was because they had experienced countless years and relied on a large amount of time to slowly study them. Only then did they fuse successfully. Fusing two principles was just like that. It was thousands to tens of thousands of times more difficult than fusing two principles. This concept was truly frightening. It is precisely because fusing four principles is too difficult that rulers are so rare. For example, the divine beginning realm only gave birth to a few more rulers because it was born for too long. Under normal circumstances, the primal chaos world would only give birth to a ruler after billions of years. For example, the closest ruler that was born in the divine beginning realm was also 1.8 billion years ago. The temporal temple continued to explain. Of course, the birth of a ruler is extremely difficult, but as long as one becomes a ruler, there will be a qualitative change. The power of the will alone. Once the four rules are fused, the power of the will will be hundreds of times stronger than the principles masters of the six void realms who have fused the three principles. The two are completely incomparable, not to mention the other aspects such as divine power and divine body. His willpower alone is hundreds of times stronger than the six void realms? Jian Wushuang was shocked, but then he frowned and said, "Since the Chaos Ruler is so much stronger than the Principle's Master, why can't I sense it in the previous battle? There's also Elder Dark Bone. He's only in the six void realms, but he can still fight against a Saint Realm Master. That's not hard to understand." Temporal Temple Master smiled. First of all, you have to understand that a Master of the Saint Realm is a Master of the Saint Realm, and they are not rulers. They are just three of the six realms of the void who are lucky enough to obtain the power of the will of the heavenly Tao. They can't be compared to a real ruler. As for why they can be on the same level as a ruler, that's because they are in the divine beginning realm. In the divine beginning realm, because of the power of the will of the heavenly Tao, all rulers who have reached the ruler realm will be greatly restricted here. They can only display 10 to 20% of their power at most. But even so, in a one-on-one fight, any ruler can crush these three masters of the Saint Realm. Because of this, rulers like us rarely stay in the divine beginning realm. Because the restrictions here are too big, we can't open our hands and feet. So, for a long time, I choose to wander in the universe battlefield. In the universe battlefield, my power will not be restricted at all. That's how I feel at ease. However, if the three masters of the Saint Realm left the divine beginning realm and went to the universe battlefield, they would not be strengthened by the power of the will of the heavenly Tao. Instead, their strength would be weakened to the level of the six void realms, and they would be even weaker than a ruler. Therefore, the three masters of the Saint Realm in the divine beginning realm have never left the divine beginning realm since they became masters of the Saint Realm. Is that so? Jian Wushuang understood. He had heard some rumors that the top experts in the divine beginning realm looked down on the three masters of the Saint Realm. Now it seemed that they had their reasons for looking down on them. Once the three masters of the Saint Realm left the divine beginning realm, their battle strength might not even be as strong as those top experts of the six void realms. "Oh, I'll give this back to you." Temporal Temple Master suddenly flipped his hand and took out a scroll that emitted an ancient aura. This scroll was the mountain river map. Looking at the mountain river map, Jian Wushuang's heart stirred. Previously, He had used all his strength to use the two dragons, killing the heaven to heavily injure the Flame Saint Realm and the Sorcerer God. But after using it, his consciousness fell into a scheme and he quickly passed out. Not only did he not know what happened next, but he also did not know what happened next. He did not even have time to take back the mountain river map that had always existed in the void above him. However, the Temporal Temple Master brought back his mountain river map when he left. "Thank you, Temple Master." Jian Wushuang quickly thanked him. The Temporal Temple Master asked directly, "Little guy, who is Xianyi to you?" Jian Wushuang was shocked, but he answered truthfully, "He is my master." As expected, Temporal Temple Master stroked his beard and was not surprised. "Temple Master knows my master?" Jian Wushuang looked at Temporal Temple Master. "Sort of." Temporal Temple Master smiled. "Your master is a very important figure. Long ago, his existence shocked the entire divine beginning realm. As the Temple Master of the Temporal Temple, I naturally have dealings with him. Although I haven't had much contact with your master, I can tell that he is a very charismatic person." Charismatic? Jian Wushuang was stunned. Yes, he is unconventional, open-minded, and loyal. He can force people in desperate situations to drink and talk, and he can sacrifice himself for his good friend. He is clearly a top overlord of the divine beginning realm, but he can lower himself to talk to some weak cultivators as equals. The Temporal Temple Master said. There was also a strange smile on his face. Of course, what I really admire about him is his strength and his spirit. Facing thousands of soldiers and countless experts, he didn't retreat even an inch. He fought against all living things. To be honest, in all my years of dominating the world, no one has ever impressed me from the bottom of my heart. Your master is the first. Hearing the words of the Temporal Temple Master, Jian Wushuang was extremely shocked. He suddenly remembered a scroll he had seen by chance. In the scroll, his master, Xianyi, faced countless experts alone. He was already at the end of his rope, but his expression did not change. He fought to the death. The battle was so dark that his master had used up his last bit of strength and blood. Just like what the Temporal Temple Master had said, it was a kind of spirit. A spirit that could fight the world and look down on all living things. In the divine beginning realm, other than his master, there was probably no one else who had this kind of spirit. Temple Master, since you know my master, you should know the origin of the Great War, right? Jian Wushuang asked. He had too many questions about the Great War. In that battle, 7-star mysterious sect was destroyed, and his master died. It could be said that the entire situation of the divine beginning realm was completely changed. However, Jian Wushuang did not know the origin of the battle or why it had erupted. Neither had his master told him about it. I do know something about the origin of the battle. Temporal Temple Master looked at Jian Wushuang and pondered for a moment before continuing. Forget it. Now that you're dealing with a Saint Realm Master, you're qualified to know about it. The origin of that battle was because of your master Xianyi. Your master is not only powerful, but also has a very high level of life and great potential. However, his life level is extremely fearful of the power of the will of heaven, which is completely unacceptable to the will of heaven. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. He knew this very well. He was also a perfect level life form, and the heavenly Tao will of the divine beginning realm could not tolerate his existence. It had personally come to kill him countless times, and it had even made the 3 saint realms kill him at all costs. Your master was not tolerated by the heavenly Tao. This is the true origin of the battle. However, your master had already passed through the weak stage and reached the peak of the principal's master. His battle strength was comparable to that of an ordinary ruler, or even stronger. Moreover, before the battle broke out, your master was about to completely integrate 4 principles to become a ruler. Think about it. Before he broke through to the ruler realm, your master was already stronger than an ordinary ruler. How strong would he be when he becomes a ruler? Temporal Temple Master asked. Jian Wushuang was shocked. Through the conversation just now, Jian Wushuang had already understood the huge gap between a principal's master and a ruler. However, under such circumstances, his master was still able to fight against a ruler and even surpass an ordinary ruler. Apart from the huge innate advantage brought by his life level, his master must have some extraordinary strength and means. Under such circumstances, if his master broke through to become a ruler, his battle strength would definitely reach an even more incredible level. Unfortunately, the power of the will of heaven seems to know that your master will break through to become a ruler soon, so it launched the world-ending war before your master became a ruler. Temporal Temple Master said. The scale of the war was incredible. After all, not only is your master strong, but most importantly, he is also one of the founders of the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect. In the past, the 3 founders of the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect all had the combat strength of a ruler, and their experts were as numerous as clouds. They were publicly recognized as the #1 force in the divine beginning realm. In front of the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect, even our Temporal Temple Master, the Heaven-Cleaving Alliance, and the Divine Ancestor Taoist Sect had to bow their heads. Jian Wushuang could not help feeling excited. At its peak, the Seven Stars Mysterious Sect was definitely the supreme overlord of the divine beginning realm. It was not something that the 3 Great Freedom Alliance and 3 Great Saint Realms could compare to. Just the 3 founders and 3 rulers alone. It was enough to hold everyone in awe. At that time, the power of the will of the heavenly Tao could only be mobilized by the 3 Great Saint Realms. However, it was impossible for the 3 Great Saint Realms to kill Xianxia by relying on the 3 Masters of the Saint Realm. Therefore, the 3 Great Saint Realms began to lobby the top forces in the 3rd heaven. The top forces, such as the 4 divine clans and the octagonal heaven sect, had suffered losses under the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect due to the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect's strong influence and the small-scale competition. Therefore, they could not help feeling jealous and resentful. This time, the 3 Saint Realms brought the will of heaven with them. Together with a series of threats and inducements, it was easy to pull them into a major alliance. Temporal Temple Master said. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang frowned. Temple Master, according to what you said, the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect had 3 masters and so many experts. Even if the 3 Saint Realms and the top forces in the 3rd heaven joined forces, they might not be able to fight against the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect, right? You're right. Even if the 3 Saint Realms and so many forces joined forces, the odds of winning against the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect are still slim. No one in the 3 Saint Realms can fight against the 3 Masters alone. The reason why the 3 Saint Realms dared to attack was that they had the help of experts from the universe, Temporal Temple Master said. What? Jian Wushuang was shocked. An expert from the universe came to help? Not an expert from the divine beginning realm? Someone from the outside world? Yes. Temporal Temple Master nodded. There were several experts who came from the universe, and each of them had the battle strength of a ruler. Most importantly, they brought a unique supreme treasure. Supreme treasure? What supreme treasure? Jian Wushuang asked. A spear with special power is the one that killed your master. Otherwise, even if a few rulers joined hands, they could at most suppress your master, but they would not be able to kill him, Temporal Temple Master said. Jian Wushuang was shocked. A perfect grade life form had extremely strong life-saving abilities and endless divine power. Under normal circumstances, since his master Xianxia already had the battle strength of a ruler, as long as his strength was not completely crushed, it was almost impossible for the opponent to kill him. Even if there were several of them working together, it was also difficult to do so. But if the opponent used that extremely special treasure, spear, Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly focused. He had already remembered the scene he had seen when his master was surrounded by countless experts. It was the spear that had pierced his master's chest, making him look like a desperate situation. With the help of those foreign masters, he had completely surpassed the Seven-Star Mysterious Sect in terms of strength at the highest level. Therefore, the world-ending war broke out. Although I did not participate in the earth-shattering battle, I watched from afar. In that battle, your master, Xianxia, was ultimately suppressed by those foreign masters. In the end, he was killed by the spear. However, your master is indeed very powerful. Even before he died, he still used his power to forcefully devour the divine powers of countless experts on the battlefield, and set up heaven-sealing formation to completely seal off the 7-star divine territory where the 7-star mysterious sect used to be. Jian Wushuang had already fallen silent. Although he did not know the origin and process of the battle, he had long known the outcome of the battle. In that battle, the 7-star mysterious sect was defeated and the entire 7-star divine realm was reduced to ruins. Countless experts fell asleep. Fortunately, at the last moment, his master Xianxia used a heaven-reaching method to completely seal the entire 7-star divine realm. Only then did he preserve the 7-star mysterious sect's inheritance, and at the same time, he created a chance for the 7-star mysterious sect to turn the tables. And he was also born in the 7-star divine realm that was completely sealed. After that battle, the 7-star mysterious sect completely became history, and the 3 great divine realms replaced the position of the 7-star mysterious sect, becoming the new overlord of the divine beginning realm. They even surpassed our 3 great freedom alliance. However, that was also because the few overlords from outside were still in the divine beginning realm. Not long after the battle ended, the foreign overlords left. The 3 saint realms did not have real overlords, so they were not as intimidating as before. Therefore, the 3 freedom alliances were on equal footing with the 3 saint realms. To a certain extent, the 3 freedom alliances were stronger than the 3 saint realms. Temporal Temple Master said. Is that so? Jian Wushuang understood. After his conversation with the Temporal Temple Master, he had learned more about the world-ending war. However, there were also questions, such as why the power of the will of heaven could not tolerate their existence. Was it simply because of their lives? Also, why did those foreign rulers come and even brought special treasures that could kill his master, Xianxia? He could not explain these questions, and Temporal Temple Master obviously did not know. He could only wait for his strength to grow in the future and then slowly explore. Little guy, you are Xianxia's disciple. If I'm not wrong, your life level should be equal to your master's. Aren't you the legendary perfect level life? Temporal Temple Master looked at Jian Wushuang. Senior, do you know about the perfect level life form? Jian Wushuang asked in surprise. Of course. I have been in the universe battlefield for many years, so I have some knowledge. I have heard about the classification of the special life forms, and the perfect level life form is known as the supreme life form. Even in the vast universe, such a life form is as rare as a phoenix feather or a qilin horn. Under normal circumstances, it is only possible for a perfect level life form to appear in thousands of chaos worlds. No one in the divine beginning realm had a perfect life form before your master. It is reasonable for a perfect level life form to suddenly appear. However, you and your master were obviously born in the divine beginning realm, and they were both perfect level life forms. This is a little unbelievable. Temporal Temple Master's expression was a little strange. Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat. His master and he were both at the perfect level of life, and they were both born in the divine beginning realm. But the difference was that his master had created his perfect level life with great magic power. Temporal Temple Master would never have thought of this, and Jian Wushuang did not intend to say it out loud. After all, it would be too shocking to say that someone had created a perfect level life. Although I don't know why you can have a perfect grade life form, you will inevitably face the same situation as your master. That is, the heavenly axiom will not allow it. This can be seen from the 3 saint realms' repeated attacks on you and the arrival of the power of the heavenly axiom's will. Temporal Temple Master said. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded solemnly. In the previous battle, the 3 saint realms had set up an inescapable net to kill you. Even the 3 masters of the saint realm and the sorcerer god had personally come to kill you, but they were still unable to kill you. This means that the 3 saint realms' power alone will not be able to do anything to you. So, Temporal Temple Master's expression became solemn. Temple Master, are you saying that there will also be a ruler-level expert from the outside world who will come to the divine beginning realm to kill me? Jian Wushuang asked. It's hard to say, but there is a possibility, Temporal Temple Master said. Jian Wushuang's heart also became heavy. He knew very well that his current strength was at most at the 3rd realm of the Void Realm. Even if he used many trump cards, he would only be able to fight against the 4th realm of the Void Realm. However, if he fought against a Saint Realm Master or even a ruler-level expert, he would not be able to resist at all. The reason why he was able to fight against the Flame Saint Master and the Sorcerer God in that battle was because he had received the power given to him by Bloodwave. Bloodwave had given him the power at the cost of the collapse of the Bloodwave realm. After giving him the power once, there was absolutely no way to give him the power a second time. He could only rely on himself. Even my master, who was at his peak, could only die in the face of the attacks of several rulers from the outside world. Compared to my master now, I'm definitely not a bit inferior. Jian Wushuang frowned. He felt tremendous pressure. Little guy, don't be too nervous. First of all, there might not be any masters from the outside world arriving. Second, even if the masters from the outside world know of your existence and want to kill you, it will take them a long time to arrive at the divine beginning realm from their own chaotic world. If I'm not mistaken, it will take at least thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years, for the overlords to reach the divine beginning realm. It might even take hundreds of thousands of years for them to arrive. Such a long period of time should be enough for you to do a lot of things, Temporal Temple Master said with a smile. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief. If the overlords from the outside world could reach the divine beginning realm in just a few decades or hundreds of years, there was really nothing he could do. However, if it was a long time, tens of thousands of years would be a lot of opportunities for him. Tens of thousands of years was already a long time for Jian Wushuang. After all, it had only been 1,000 years since he was born. In such a short period of time, he had already stood at the peak of the divine beginning realm, and his strength was comparable to a principal's master of the three void realms if he was given thousands of years or tens of thousands of years. Who knew what level he would have reached? He might even have become a ruler. Of course, these were all Jian Wushuang's own expectations. Moreover, he could not be sure when the experts from the outside world would arrive. He did not know what level he could reach at that time, so he could only take one step at a time. Little guy, I know that you are very talented in space-time. Not only did you comprehend the space-time divine skill from the space-time gold stone I left behind, but you also integrated my space-time divine skill into your swordsmanship. This is indeed rare, Temporal Temple Master suddenly said. Jian Wushuang immediately looked at Temporal Temple Master. Your talent in the space-time principles is so high that I should take you as my disciple under normal circumstances. Unfortunately, I have lived for so many years and seen too many things. I have already given up on taking you as my disciple. Moreover, you are already Xian Yi's disciple. Although Xian Yi is dead, I have no intention of taking him as my disciple, Temporal Temple Master said. Jian Wushuang looked calm. He had heard from Temple Master Bai Xing that the Temple Master had already given up on taking him in as a disciple. He had never expected that the Temple Master would take him in as a disciple. However, although I can't take you in as a disciple, I can give you some guidance on the space-time principles, Temporal Temple Master said with a smile. I've carefully checked your current physical condition. If nothing unexpected happens, you won't be able to condense a trace of divine power within 300 years. In other words, you won't have much strength during these 300 years, let alone fighting with others. However, these 300 years won't affect your comprehension of the principles and the application of the principles. So, if you're willing, you can stay by my side for the next 300 years and cultivate in this independent space. What do you think? Jian Wushuang was overjoyed when he heard the Temple Master's words. He nodded without hesitation and said, Temple Master, I'm willing. Of course, Jian Wushuang was willing. What kind of existence was the Temple Master? No one in the divine beginning realm could compare to him in terms of space-time principles alone. It was extremely difficult for others to come into contact with such a super expert. Even some of the higher-ups of the Temporal Temple, people like Temple Master Bai Xing Batsong, and others could not meet the Temporal Temple Master just because they wanted to, let alone stay by his side all the time. In the divine beginning realm, there were countless experts, but many powerful principles masters were also eager to seek guidance from the Temporal Temple Master because the Temporal Temple Master could give them a little guidance on the principles of space and time. It was a great help to these masters of principles, but the Temporal Temple Master could not be bothered to give them any guidance. If he could cultivate by the Temporal Temple Master's side, the Temporal Temple Master would not be stingy with his guidance. It would benefit any cultivator who was proficient in the principles of space and time. It could be said that cultivating by the Temporal Temple Master's side was a dream opportunity for countless cultivators. But now, the Temporal Temple Master had given this opportunity to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was not stupid. Of course, he knew that this was a rare opportunity, so how could he refuse it? Well, in these 300 years, I will arrange your cultivation so that you can make the greatest progress during the 300 years when divine power cannot be condensed. After 300 years, when your strength recovers, I will leave the divine beginning realm and continue to explore the universe battlefield. The rest of your journey will be up to you, Temporal Temple Master said. Thank you, Temple Master. Jian Wushuang thanked him profusely. In the past 300 years, besides staying by my side and cultivating according to my arrangements, there are 15 principles temples on my island. They should be of great help to you, Bai Xing. Temporal Temple Master glanced at the void beside him. Temple Master. Temple Master Bai Xing's figure appeared directly. Take this little girl to the Principal's Temple, Temporal Temple Master instructed. Yes. Temple Master Bai Xing nodded respectfully. Jian Wushuang immediately followed Temple Master Bai Xing. After walking out of the independent space where Temporal Temple Master lived, Jian Wushuang and Temple Master Bai Xing walked side by side on the Saha Island. Little girl. Temple Master Bai Xing had just opened her mouth, but she immediately stopped. That's not right. Although you're still an immortal saint, your real combat strength is stronger than that of an ordinary Principles Master. You're on the same level as me. It doesn't seem appropriate for me to call you little girl. I'll just call you by your name. Heavenly Sword Marquis. What did Temple Master tell you just now? Temple Master Bai Xing asked curiously. Nothing much. He just told me about the difference in strength between a ruler and a Principles Master, as well as some things about the 3 saint realms. In addition, Temple Master wants me to cultivate by his side for the next 300 years. Jian Wushuang said. He did not mention his master and the 7-star mysterious sect. What? Temple Master Bai Xing was shocked. Temple Master wants you to cultivate by his side for 300 years? Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. Temple Master Bai Xing immediately praised him. Heavenly Sword Marquis. I have to say that you're really lucky. Temple Master had made up his mind many years ago not to accept any more disciples. This time, he didn't make an exception when he met you, but he asked you to cultivate by his side. Our temporal temple has been established for a long time. Although there have been countless experts who are good at space-time principles, there are probably no more than 20 of them who have received personal guidance from Temple Master. Moreover, Temple Master has only given them some simple guidance once or twice, but there hasn't been anyone who can cultivate by Temple Master's side until now. Tut-tut, if you can cultivate with the Temple Master, even if you are the Temple Master's personal disciple, you won't get the same treatment. You are really lucky this time. Ah! Jian Wushuang was stunned at first, but then he nodded slightly. Indeed, it was really lucky that he could cultivate with the Temple Master for 300 years. Temple Master Bai Xing, Temple Master wants me to go to the Temple of Principles. The Temple of Principles should be the palace complex that you pointed out to me, right? Jian Wushuang changed the subject. Jian Wushuang remembered that when he had just arrived on the Saha Island, Temple Master Bai Xing had brought him to several fortuitous places on the island. However, there was one place that Temple Master Bai Xing pointed out to him but did not bring him in. It was a group of palaces. According to Temple Master Bai Xing, the threshold of the palaces was extremely high. Even an ordinary Principles Master of the 1st or 2nd realm of the Void Realm was not qualified to enter. In order to enter, one usually needed to master more than 2 rules. Since the threshold was so high, it was obvious that the palaces were extraordinary. You guessed right. The group of palaces that I pointed out to you is where the Principles Temple is located. As for the purpose of the Principles Temple, can't you guess it? Temple Master Bai Xing looked at Jian Wushuang with interest. Of course, the Principles Temple is aimed at the rules, but the threshold is so high. Obviously, it's not only aimed at the space-time principles. If nothing goes wrong, The purpose of the Principles Temple should be to integrate the principles, right? Jian Wushuang said. Smart. Temple Master Bai Xing smiled. There are a total of 16 Principles Temples. Apart from the other one which is used for the affinity test, the other 15 are all for fusing another principle with the spacetime principles. Cultivating in the Principles Temple might not guarantee that you'll be able to fuse these two principles, but at least it's much easier than comprehending them yourself. These 15 temples focus on the fusion of principles, including destruction and spacetime, life and death and spacetime, life and spacetime, thunder and spacetime, and so on. Heavenly Sword Marquis, I know that apart from the spacetime principles, the second principle you have comprehended is the samsara principles. Among these 15 temples, there is one that combines the samsara and spacetime principles, which you can use. The fusion of spacetime and reincarnation? Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up. The fusion of spacetime principles and reincarnation principles were two different principles. When he was in the Blood Wave Temple, he had barely found the key points of the fusion. He had already entered the rudiments of the fusion of the two principles. What he needed next was a lot of time to constantly adapt and study them. Now, if the Principles Temple that corresponded to spacetime and reincarnation was really helpful to the integration of the two principles, it would definitely save him a lot of time. Let's go to the Principles Temple now, Jian Wushuang said. Although there were 15 Principles Temples for the integration of principles, he did not need the other Principles Temples for the time being. Only the Principles Temple that corresponded to spacetime and reincarnation was useful to him. It would be of great use to him. Don't worry, before you go to the Principles Temple, you have to test your affinity for the principles. Temple Master Bai Xing said. Rule affinity? Jian Wushuang was puzzled. There are all kinds of principles between heaven and earth, and I don't need to explain how useful these principles are to cultivators. Every cultivator has a different affinity with the principles between heaven and earth. This affinity represents whether he has the talent and qualification to comprehend this principle. Take you for example. You have been comprehending the spacetime principles and the samsara principles at a very fast speed and have a very high talent. This means that you have a very high affinity with these two principles. Only in this way can you comprehend these two principles so quickly. But if it were other principles, such as you comprehending the life-death principles, the same perception, the same opportunity, and the same time, the achievements you can achieve in the life-death principles might not necessarily be able to achieve your achievements in the spacetime principles and the samsara principles, Temple Master Bai Xing said. I see. The affinity is equivalent to the talent for meditating on various principles. Only when the affinity is high, the speed of meditating on the corresponding principles will be faster. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. He could understand what Temple Master Bai Xing meant by affinity. He could understand. Yes, the affinity with the principles determines whether you have the qualification and talent to study this principle. You can comprehend the principles of spacetime and reincarnation in such a short time, which means that you have a very high affinity with these two principles. If you are an ordinary immortal saint, then you don't need to care about your affinity with the principles of heaven and earth. But you are not ordinary, Temple Master Bai Xing continued to explain. You already have the battle strength of the three realms of void, but you have already grasped the power of will. The strength of the principles master depends largely on the power of will. As for the way to obtain the power of will, the most important thing is to grasp more principles or to integrate more principles. You have already grasped one principle, and it won't be long before you grasp two principles. In the future, you must find a way to grasp the third or even the fourth principle. Naturally, you must now figure out which principles are suitable for you to comprehend, so that you can make corresponding preparations in advance. Jian Wushuang suddenly understood. Yes, it was enough for him to master the principles of spacetime and reincarnation. However, once he reached the level of principles master, he had to find a way to master more principles. At this time, he had to figure out which principles were suitable for him to comprehend. Heavenly Sword Marquis, come with me. Temple Master Bai Xing led Jian Wushuang to the building complex of the Principles Temple and directly entered the temple at the front. There were all kinds of air currents in the magnificent temple. These air currents represented the principles of heaven and earth. At a glance, there were at least hundreds of such air currents. Jian Wushuang could immediately sense the existence of the space-time principles and reincarnation principles from these air currents. Temple Master Bai Xing, what should I do? Jian Wushuang asked. It's simple. You just sit here with your legs crossed, close your eyes and try your best to communicate with the surrounding principles' power. Temple Master Bai Xing said. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded and immediately sat down in the center of the hall according to Temple Master Bai Xing's instructions. Then he closed his eyes and began to communicate with the airflow that represented the principle's power. An hour passed in the blink of an eye. During this 1 hour, the air currents in the hall surrounded Jian Wushuang. Among the air currents, a few of them emitted light, some dazzling and some dim. Well, you can open your eyes now, Temple Master Bai Xing said. Jian Wushuang immediately opened his eyes and saw the airflow that was emitting light. These glowing airflow should be the principle's power that has a high affinity with me, right? Jian Wushuang said because he had noticed the most dazzling airflow among these glowing airflow. It was the airflow that represented the space-time principles. Yes, the more dazzling these glows are, the more affinity you have with this principle. Without a doubt, your affinity with the space-time principles is the highest. As for the reincarnation principles, it is slightly inferior to the space-time principles, but its affinity is still very high. In addition, your affinity with the earth principles, the gold principles, and the fate principles is also good. You can find a way to understand these principles in the future. But what surprised me the most was the principles of destruction. Heavenly Sword Marquis, I didn't expect your talent in the principles of destruction to be so high. It's not much weaker than yours in the space-time principles. Temple Master Bai Xing said with a hint of surprise. Jian Wushuang immediately looked at one of the equally dazzling airflow that was comparable to the airflow of the space-time principles. That airflow represented the destruction principles. I didn't expect my affinity with the destruction principles to be so high. Jian Wushuang was also surprised. It was not that he had not been exposed to the destruction principles. After all, he had met many experts who were good at the destruction principles. However, even though he had come into contact with the principles of destruction, he had never tried to comprehend it. After all, the principles of spacetime and the principles of reincarnation were enough for him to study. He did not have the time and energy to study other principles. Because he had never tried, he subconsciously thought that he was not suitable to study the principles of destruction. But in the end, his affinity with the principles of destruction was not weaker than his own principles of spacetime. The light is so dazzling, and your affinity with the destruction principles is much higher than your affinity with the samsara principles. It would be a pity if you don't comprehend the destruction principles. Temple Master Bai Xing said. I didn't know that I had the talent to comprehend the destruction principles. Now that I know it, after I have mastered the samsara principles, the next thing I want to comprehend is the destruction principles. Jian Wushuang said with a smile. A cultivator, even a principles master, has limited energy. Under normal circumstances, principles masters can only choose 4 rules to comprehend. You have already comprehended 2 principles. If you want to comprehend the destruction principles as the next principle, you can choose 3 principles. As for the 4th principles, you have a good affinity with the earth principles, the gold principles, and the fate principles. You can choose one of them to comprehend. Temple Master Bai Xing said. A principles master could only become a ruler if he had comprehended 4 principles and completely fused them. Therefore, Jian Wushuang had to comprehend 4 principles as well, now that he had 3 principles. Spacetime, reincarnation, and destruction, the only principles left was, there's no rush. I'm still far from mastering the samsara principles and destruction principles, let alone fusing all 3 principles. I'll consider choosing the 4th principle after I've comprehended and fused all 3 principles. Jian Wushuang muttered. It's up to you. Let's go. I'll take you to the principles temple. Immediately, Temple Master Bai Xing brought Jian Wushuang to the principles temple that focused on spacetime and reincarnation. As soon as they entered the principles temple, Jian Wushuang immediately sensed the 2 different principles that filled the entire temple. These 2 principles were the spacetime principles and the samsara principles, and both were very strong. Heavenly Sword Marquis, you can sit down and slowly feel it with your heart. Soon, you will be able to feel some strange things in this temple, Temple Master Bai Xing said. Jian Wushuang nodded and sat down cross-legged according to Temple Master Bai Xing's instructions. He began to feel it with his heart. In his senses, the power of two different principles that filled the temple began to slowly merge. Yes, the reason why the principles temple was unique was that there was a process of merging two different principles in the principles temple. What Jian Wushuang saw now was the process of merging the space-time principles and the samsara principles. From the beginning to the end, the two principles completely merged into one. Jian Wushuang saw it clearly. I saw a complete cycle of heavenly Tao in the Blood Wave Temple, which also included the merging of various principles. Unfortunately, I spent most of my energy on mastering the spacetime principles and the samsara principles. As for the merging of the two principles, although I studied it for a while, it was too short and didn't involve much. Now, the principles temple is purely a fusion process of the two principles of spacetime and reincarnation. The fusion process is clearer and more detailed than what I saw in Blood Wave Temple, so it will be more helpful to me. Jian Wushuang was pleasantly surprised. He only needed a simple scan to understand how helpful the principles temple was to him. He had already barely taken that step in the fusion of the two principles of spacetime and reincarnation, and could be considered to have entered the rudiments. Under such circumstances, if he could cultivate in the principles temple, then his progress in the fusion of the two principles would definitely be huge. It would not be long before he could truly fuse the two principles together. Heavenly Sword Marquis, you stay here and meditate. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. If Temple Master has any instructions, I'll let you know, Temple Master Bai Xing said. Thank you, Temple Master Bai Xing. Jian Wushuang thanked him. Temple Master Bai Xing waved his hand and left quickly. Jian Wushuang was the only one left in the huge principles temple. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged in the center of the temple. He closed his eyes and began to meditate quietly. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 10 days, Jian Wushuang stayed in the principles temple. By watching the fusion process of the two principles and studying them, he had improved a lot in the fusion of the two principles of spacetime and reincarnation. However, Jian Wushuang did not stay any longer. After all, the principles temple had always been on Saha Island. As long as he had time, he could cultivate in the principles temple. However, the temple master did not stay on Saha Island all the time. Now, he had the opportunity to cultivate with the temple master. Of course, he did not want to miss the 300 years. In the independent space where the temple master lived, Jian Wushuang stood respectfully in an ordinary manner. The temple master was holding a kettle in front of him and watering a young sapling that had just sprouted. Temporal Temple Master was very familiar with both the kettle and the watering. He was very calm, no different from an ordinary person. Jian Wushuang saw all of this. Little guy, guess what I'm doing? Temporal Temple Master turned to look at Jian Wushuang after watering the sapling. Temple Master, you must be planting a tree, Jian Wushuang replied. How long has this tree been growing? Temporal Temple Master asked again. This tree? Jian Wushuang looked at the sapling carefully. In his eyes, the sapling was very ordinary and nothing special. It was obviously an ordinary sapling that could be seen everywhere in the world. Jian Wushuang could clearly sense the vitality of the sapling. Judging from its vitality, this sapling should have been planted less than 10 days ago. If I'm not mistaken, it must have been planted after you returned to the divine beginning realm, Temple Master. Jian Wushuang answered truthfully. Oh really? Temporal Temple Master said with a faint smile. Then take a look at it now. After saying that, Temporal Temple Master sprinkled the kettle in his hand on the sapling. In an instant, the sapling began to change. In the manner under Jian Wushuang's gaze, the ordinary little sapling that had just shown its leaves began to grow at an incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a towering tree, and it was still growing. Its branches were luxuriant and luxuriant. Walala! The trunk extended, and the entire tree was like a huge mushroom vine, covering the entire manor. In the end, it even covered the entire independent space. At this time, the diameter of the tree had already exceeded hundreds of meters. An extremely ancient aura emanated from the tree. Jian Wushuang stared at the tree in front of him in astonishment. He could also sense the vitality of the tree and thus determine its age. However, the current age of the tree was definitely more than 10 million years old. This was an ancient tree that had lived for more than 10 million years. How could this be? Jian Wushuang was extremely shocked. It's simple. This is the original appearance of the sapling. However, in order to make it easier for me to irrigate it and to not attract too much attention, I use time conversion to keep it in the sapling stage, Temple Master said. Time conversion? Jian Wushuang was stunned and asked, "What is time conversion?" Time conversion is the conversion of two things of different time periods. For example, this tree has lived for tens of millions of years, but after time conversion, it still looks like a sapling. Similarly, after time conversion, a sapling can also turn into an ancient tree that is tens of millions of years old, the Temple Master explained. The principles of time and space are profound. After mastering the principles of time and space, the next step is to improve the application of the principles of time and space. The first step in the application of the principles of time and space is the conversion of time and space. The conversion of time and space is one of the methods of the conversion of time and space. This conversion can only be used on inanimate objects such as mountains and lands. As for the conversion of time and space to life, that is a higher level method. In addition to time conversion, there is also space conversion. This space conversion is even easier to demonstrate. Look, Temple Master waved his hand. The independent space they were in was originally a manor, but in the blink of an eye, it had turned into a huge plain. The plain was clear and full of vitality. Temple Master waved his hand again, and the plain disappeared. In its place was an endless sea. This is... Jian Wushuang's expression changed. From the manor to the plain and then to the sea, everything was within Temple Master's control. This method immediately reminded Jian Wushuang of the secret skill of the mountain and river map, the Thousand Treasures Great World. The Thousand Treasures Great World contained many worlds, and each world had its own characteristics and were different. The Thousand Treasures Great World changed according to Jian Wushuang's will. You have the map of mountains and rivers. The world of treasures in the map is actually a kind of world transformation. You should be able to understand the space transformation more easily, Temple Master Bai Xing said. Indeed. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly, but he immediately asked in puzzlement, Temple Master, although the space-time transformation is very strange, it shouldn't be very useful in a fight, whether it's time transformation or space transformation, right? It's not very useful. The Temple Master nodded. Time-space conversion is only the most rudimentary use of the space-time principles. After mastering the space-time conversion, one can truly step into the threshold of using the space-time principles. As for in a real battle, there is almost no need to use the space-time conversion. However, after you master the space-time conversion, the biggest use is not the space-time conversion, but your use of the space-time principles has reached a new level. The difference is still very big. Temple Master smiled and continued, Little guy, now that you have completely mastered the principles of space-time, how many principles of space-time do you think you can use now? All of them, of course. I can use all the power of the principles of space-time around me, Jian Wushuang said. That's right. Since you can use all the power of the principles of space-time around you, and the power of the principles of space-time between heaven and earth is endless, why do different people control the power of the principles of space-time differently? Temple Master Bai Xing looked at Jian Wushuang with interest. Jian Wushuang frowned and said, This is the different application of the principles of time and space. Yes, it is the application. To give a simple example, two people draw water from the same river. One of them draws water from a bowl. He can only draw water back and forth bowl by bowl. How much water can he draw back from the river? The other person is using a bucket to fetch water back and forth. Although it's still insignificant to the river, the amount of water that he can fetch back is far from what the first person can compare to. The space-time principles that we know is that river. It's endless, and no matter how you use it, it can be used by you. But the difference is that the tool that we use to fetch water is the use of the space-time principles. Right now, your use of the space-time principles is very shallow, and it's still at the most basic stage. You're just like the person who uses a water bowl to fetch water. The space-time principles that can be used at one time is only a small bowl. As for a master of space-time conversion, he is equivalent to a person who uses a bucket to fetch water. Although he still uses relatively simple tools, a bucket of water is much more than a bowl of water. Therefore, after mastering the space-time conversion, the power of space-time principles that he can use immediately will be greatly enhanced under normal circumstances. When two cultivators who have comprehended the space-time principles use the same space-time techniques, the power of the cultivator who has mastered the space-time transformation is at least 10 times stronger than that of the cultivator who has not. This is the difference. At this point, the temple master finally stopped and looked at Jian Wushuang. I understand. Jian Wushuang looked as if he had suddenly realized something. After mastering the space-time transformation, the technique of the space-time transformation is not important. What is important is that the use of the power of the space-time principles will be much stronger. That's right. The temporal temple master smiled. Temple master, according to what you said, the time-space conversion is only a superficial method of using the time-space principles. Then what is it after the time-space conversion? Jian Wushuang asked curiously. The time-space conversion is the first stage of the use of time-space. This stage is very long. More than 99% of the cultivators in the divine beginning realm who are good at time-space stay in this stage. As for the second stage, it is time-space imprisonment. Space-time imprisonment? Jian Wushuang's expression changed. He was no stranger to space-time imprisonment. He had mastered space-time teleportation and had a strong life-saving ability. Only by using space-time imprisonment could he defeat him. The three Saint Realms had been prepared for the battle on Saha Island. They had asked Master Qingyan to use space-time imprisonment from the beginning, not giving him a chance to escape. The space-time imprisonment can only be used by experts who use the space-time principles. I heard from Temple Master Bai Xing that there are no more than 20 people in the divine beginning realm who can use the space-time imprisonment, Jian Wushuang said. Yes, the space-time conversion can only be regarded as a shallow use of the space-time principles, but at the level of the space-time imprisonment, the use of the space-time principles is already considered good. Such people are indeed not big in the divine beginning realm, so it's normal that there are no more than 20 of them. Temporal Temple Master nodded slightly. After mastering the space-time imprisonment, the next step is to master the third stage of the application of the space-time principles, the space-time flow rate. Flow rate. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. Is it the same as the space-time tower? The time flow rate in the three-story space-time tower was completely different from that in the outside world. In the first story of the space-time tower, the time flow rate was 10 times slower than that in the outside world, and in the second story it was 100 times slower. In the third story, the time flow rate was 1,000 times slower, which was incredible. The characteristics of the space-time tower were clearly the same as the space-time flow that the temporal temple master had mentioned. The space-time tower can be considered as such. However, the space-time tower only purely changes the flow of time. On the other hand, the real flow of time and space can change together. There are still some differences between the two. The temporal temple master smiled. Actually, in the divine beginning realm, many experts who specialize in the principles of spacetime can simply change the flow of time. However, they can only barely change the flow of time in a small area. Not only is the area small, but it can only be maintained for a short period of time. Cannot be sustained at all. However, experts who have truly grasped the move of the flow of time and space can turn the flow of time in a piece of space into eternity. They can even refine it into a treasure. Just like the space-time tower, I refined it myself. The flow of time in it is completely stable and can continue. Jian Wushuang understood. Temple Master, the flow of time and space is only the third stage of the application of the space-time rule. What about the fourth stage? Jian Wushuang asked curiously. The fourth stage. That is a higher level of application. Unfortunately, even I am far from being able to reach that level. Even if I tell you, it is useless. In the divine beginning realm, if you can reach the third stage of the application of the spacetime principles and master the flow of time and space, it will be very impressive, Temple Master said. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Apparently, the Temporal Temple Master was also in the third stage of mastering the flow of time and space. In this way, the Temporal Temple Master was already the one who had the highest understanding of the principles of time and space in the history of the divine beginning realm. However, Jian Wushuang had not even reached the rudiments of the principles of time and space. Even if he knew the fourth stage, it would be useless. Little guy, you have been staying here for the past 300 years. I will teach you the use of the spacetime principles according to your progress. If you encounter any problems that you don't understand, you can take the initiative to ask. With your talent in the spacetime principles under my guidance, although you won't be able to reach the stage of spacetime imprisonment in the past 300 years, it shouldn't be difficult for you to master the spacetime transformation. Work hard, Temporal Temple Master said. Yes, thank you, Temple Master. Jian Wushuang was pleasantly surprised. From that day on, Jian Wushuang spent most of his time in this independent space. He followed Temporal Temple Master, sometimes watching him plant trees, sometimes meditating on his own, and sometimes asking for advice from Temporal Temple Master. Temporal Temple Master was not stingy with him. Whenever he asked a question, he would guide and answer it in various ways, either directly or indirectly. Under such circumstances, Jian Wushuang's application of the principles of spacetime had been improving at an alarming rate. Spring went to the east, and time continued to pass. 300 years was insignificant to the divine beginning realm, which had existed for an unknown number of years. For an ancient existence like Temporal Temple Master, 300 years passed in a snap of the fingers. He simply planted trees a few times, let alone 300 years, 30,000 years would pass easily. However, to Jian Wushuang, these 300 years were very precious. He did not dare to waste any time during these 300 years. He had been cultivating wholeheartedly. Now, the 300 years had finally passed. He was still in the manor in the independent space. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the empty ground with his eyes slightly closed. The surroundings were calm and peaceful. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's expression changed. He slowly extended his right arm and opened his palm. There was a faint white light in the center of his palm. This white light was extremely sharp. It was a sword essence. Sword essence. This was Jian Wushuang's sword essence condensed from his own sword principle. At first, it was extremely weak, as if it would be extinguished at any time. But soon, the light of the sword shadow became brighter and more dazzling. The size of the sword essence kept increasing, and in the blink of an eye, it formed a 3-foot sword shadow. After the 3-foot sword shadow was formed, it did not stop there. Instead, it continued to enlarge. It was clearly a sword shadow, but it suddenly turned into a sword river in Jian Wushuang's hand and spread out. The sword river disappeared, and then a towering sword mountain appeared. After that, the sword shadow evolved into various things. After a long time, the sword shadow disappeared, and Jian Wushuang opened his eyes. Temple Master. After opening his eyes, Jian Wushuang immediately stood up and bowed respectfully to the figure in front of him. Sword essence evolves everything. Have you reached the third realm of sword principle? Temporal Temple Master looked at Jian Wushuang with interest. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. Jian Wushuang had already reached the third realm of sword principle. He had already reached the second realm, boundless sword tree. His boundless sword skill had already reached the limit of the second stage of sword principle when he was in the blood wave realm. After returning to the time-space island, he had cultivated in this independent space for 300 years. Although he focused most of his energy on the application of the spacetime principles, the principles were used in conjunction with sword principle. While studying the application of the principles, he also took into account sword principle and swordsmanship. Therefore, he had also made some progress in the way of the sword. Now, he had broken through to the third realm of the way of the sword and evolved everything. The third level of Tao is common among the principles. Most principles masters have reached the third level of Tao. Only a few weaker principles masters are still at the second level. Now that you have reached the third level of sword principle, if you fight with principles masters in the future, you won't be at a disadvantage. Now that you've made a breakthrough in sword principle, how about your swordsmanship? How are the sword techniques you created? Temporal Temple Master looked at Jian Wushuang. The 7 sword techniques of the Wushuang Sword Manual have been improved. Although they are not the best among the unique skills created by the Principles Master, they are not weak, Jian Wushuang said. That's right. Temporal Temple Master nodded slightly. Although your 7 sword moves were created when you were weak, this sword move is quite complete. It involves all aspects and can be improved continuously. Moreover, this sword move of yours can be combined with the space-time principles. It's already very rare that you can use the space-time principles perfectly. Jian Wushuang also smiled. Then he said, Temple Master, you asked me to try to integrate the space-time divine skill into these 7 sword techniques. I've tried my best. Blood Azura has integrated the first move of the space-time divine skill, the heaven-designated skill, and the second move of the space-time divine skill, Kanyang, which is part of the unparalleled sword manual I created. Oh! Temporal Temple Master's eyes lit up. Show me what you've got. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang waved his sword in the open space of the manor. Whoosh! The sword swept across, and a scarlet sword shadow burst out. The sword shadow was like the setting sun, its red light illuminating the world. However, the setting sun was obviously incomplete. The peerless sword technique. The setting sun. Wang. The sword shadow swept across the void in front of him, instantly creating a large space ripple. This space ripple was filled with a red light. Following that, the scarlet sword shadow directly exploded. Rumble. An endless killing power swept out. A huge space-time storm instantly formed. The second move of the space-time divine art, space-time annihilation. Under this sword move, the power of space-time annihilation was completely unleashed, and the power was earth-shaking. When the Temple Master saw this scene, the light in his eyes became even brighter. When the space-time annihilation completely dissipated, the Temple Master looked at Jian Wushuang again. Yes, your sword skill is powerful, and the sword skill combines space-time annihilation. The two complement each other and are much stronger than your own pure space-time annihilation. Most importantly, the hidden sword skill of space-time annihilation makes it impossible to guard against. When I created this sword skill, I only wanted to integrate space-time storm into it. After mastering space-time annihilation, I wanted to integrate space-time annihilation into this move. Although I spent a lot of effort, I still succeeded, Jian Wushuang said with a smile. Space-time divine skill was the most powerful divine ability created by the Temporal Temple Master. Now, Jian Wushuang had directly integrated this divine ability into his sword skill, which made the Temple Master praise him greatly. It's a pity that I have only successfully integrated time-space annihilation into the first move of setting sun. However, although I have mastered the fourth move of the time-space divine skill, time-space illusion kill, I still can't integrate it into the life and death instant that I created, Jian Wushuang said. Among the 7 sword moves of the Wushuang Sword Manual, the life and death instant was the most terrifying burst of speed in an instant. It was a strike that could kill the opponent without giving the opponent a chance to react. Not only did the strike need to burst out with terrifying speed, but it also needed to carry a shocking power that could directly kill the opponent. The fourth move of the space-time divine skill was called Space-Time Illusion Kill. Jian Wushuang had mastered this move in the past 300 years, and this move also needed to burst out with terrifying speed to kill the opponent in an instant. It was exactly the same as the instant of life and death, so the two could naturally be combined. After Jian Wushuang mastered the space-time illusion kill, the Temple Master had reminded him to try to integrate the space-time illusion kill into the instant of life and death. Jian Wushuang did the same, but after all, there was too much time and it was not effective yet. Don't worry, the space-time divine skill is, after all, my painstaking work over the years. Every move is very impressive. If you casually integrate it into your own sword skill, wouldn't it make the divine skill I created too useless? The Temple Master said with a smile. Jian Wushuang smiled. It was true that space-time divine skill was created by Temporal Temple Master himself. It was already amazing that he could integrate two divine abilities into his swordsmanship in such a short period of time. He had just mastered the space-time illusion kill. It was indeed too fast for him to integrate it into his swordsmanship. Little guy, it has been 300 years. Your divine power should have recovered to its peak, Temporal Temple Master suddenly asked. It has completely recovered. Jian Wushuang nodded. Because of the backlash of the power given by Blood Wave, he could not condense his divine power during the past 300 years. He had been in a weak state, but after 300 years he finally began to recover. Now his strength had recovered to its peak. After your divine power has recovered, have you sensed any signs of a breakthrough? Temporal Temple Master asked again. No, Jian Wushuang his head with a bitter smile. His divine power had long reached the limits of the Immortal Saint, and he had completely mastered the space-time principles. His sword principle had already reached the third realm. If it were an ordinary person, they would have broken through long ago, but he showed no signs of a breakthrough at all. It's indeed not easy to break through to the principle's master level at the perfect life level. As far as I know, your master Xianxia took a long time to break through to the principle's master level. When he finally broke through, he had already fused 3 principles, Temporal Temple Master said. What? Jian Wushuang was his master had fused 3 principles to become a principle's master? Like his master, he was a perfect life form. Could it be that he had to wait until the 3 principles were fused before he could break through? But that was too far away. I don't know the details. You don't have to be too impatient. The more impatient you are, the harder it will be for you to break through. Everything will be fine when the time comes, Temporal Temple Master said. I will follow your instructions, Temple Master. Jian Wushuang nodded repeatedly. Well, 300 years have passed. It's time for me to leave and go to the universe battlefield. But before I leave, there are some things I have to explain to you. Temporal Temple Master smiled. In the magnificent palace, many high-level experts of the Temporal Temple had gathered together. Although Jian Wushuang was not one of the high-level experts of the Temporal Temple, because of the battle on Saha Island and his explosive power, he had gained a very high among the of the Temporal Temple. In addition, over the past 300 years, Jian Wushuang had cultivating by the side of the Temple Master. This kind of treatment had never been given to anyone since the creation of the Temporal Temple. It was clear that Jian Wushuang's position in the Temporal Temple Master's heart was very high. Therefore, Jian Wushuang also had a place in the temple. The Temporal Temple Master sat on the throne at the top and looked down at the people below. I have been adventuring in the universe battlefield all year round. This time, I only came back temporarily. I plan to go to the universe battlefield again soon. And before I leave, Bai Xing, the Temple Master shouted. Palace Master. Temple Master Bai Xing immediately stood up. When I am adventuring in the universe battlefield, you will still be the acting Temple Master of the Temporal Temple. You will be in charge of all the matters in the Temporal Temple. The Temporal Temple Master said. Yes. Temple Master Bai Xing nodded respectfully. Ba Cong, you will still be the supervisor of the palace and assist Bai Xing in managing the Temporal Temple. Temporal Temple Master said. Yes, Master. He accepted the order. Phosphorescence. Temporal Temple Master continued to issue some more appointments, which were basically the same as before. In the end, Heavenly Sword Marquis, Temporal Temple Master suddenly said. Jian Wushuang was stunned, and the surrounding people all looked at Jian Wushuang. Temple Master. Jian Wushuang walked forward. Heavenly Sword Marquis, although you are only an immortal saint, your strength has long surpassed that of an ordinary principles master. I now appoint you as the 6th inspector of the Temporal Temple. Do you agree? Temple Master said. Inspector. Jian Wushuang was shocked. He had been in the Temporal Temple for so many years, so he knew a little about the positions of the higher-ups in the temple. Temple Master and Inspector were undoubtedly at the top and held great power. As for the Inspector, he was under the supervisor and also had great power. He was also one of the highest-ranking officials in the Temporal Temple. In terms of status and power, he was higher than many Principles Masters in the 2 or even 3 Void Realms. Moreover, there had only been 5 patrol masters before, but now the temporal temple master had appointed him as the 6th. He's... Jian Wushuang was a little stunned. He could not help looking around at the opal around him. Sure enough, the surrounding principal's masters looked at him strangely. There were some strange emotions in their eyes. The principal's masters immediately communicated with each other secretly. The temple master wants Heavenly Sword Marquis to be an inspector. An inspector has a lot of power. Usually, only experts in the 4 void realms and above will be appointed. As for Heavenly Sword Marquis, although his performance in the previous battle was amazing, everyone knows that he used external forces. As for his own strength, he is still far from being appointed as an inspector. Right? You can't say that. After all, in the previous battle, even without external help, the Heavenly Sword Marquis combat strength was still at the 3rd level of the Void Realm. Moreover, he was only an immortal saint, and his talent and potential were so great. Now, it has been 300 years since that battle, and he has been cultivating by the Temple Master's side. Perhaps he has already reached the 4th level of the Void Realm. It's possible, but he's still too young and inexperienced. It's still too early for him to become an inspector and become the highest-ranking official of the Temporal Temple. The principal's masters discussed quietly and had their own opinions on the appointment of the Temporal Temple Master. As for Jian Wushuang himself, he knew his own limits. He immediately said, "Temple Master, let's not talk about whether I'm qualified to be an inspector. I've only been in the Temporal Temple for a short period of time. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for me to be an inspector without much contribution to the Temporal Temple. It's not a problem for you to be an inspector with your strength. As for your experience and contribution, you can slowly accumulate them in the future. I said that you're qualified to be an inspector, so naturally you're qualified. You don't have to worry too much. I'll ask you if you're willing to be an inspector." Temporal Temple Master looked down. There was a hint of deep meaning in his eyes. Jian Wushuang was obviously still hesitant, but when he noticed the profound in the Temple Master's eyes, he stopped thinking and said, "I do. Well, from today on, you are the 6th inspector of the temple." The Temple Master smiled. He continued, "Inspector, you have a very high position in the temple and your position is extraordinary. You will fight for the temple directly. In the divine beginning realm, if there is a fight between the temple and the experts from other forces, the inspector will deal with it immediately. Although your strength has reached the required level, the enmity between you and the 3 saint realms is too deep to be resolved. In the future, when you fight for the temporal temple, you will inevitably have to deal with the 3 saint realms again. In order to prevent the 3 saint realms from using any tricks against you in the future, here is a token. Keep it well." The Temporal Temple Master waved his hand. A token emitting a special space-time fluctuation was thrown towards Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took the token and held it in his hand. He asked in puzzlement, "Temple Master, what is this token?" "This token is a life-saving token that I personally refined. Can save your life. As long as I have this token, I can guarantee that no one in the divine beginning realm can really kill you," Temporal Temple Master said. His words were filled with absolute confidence. He did have such confidence. As a ruler-level expert, he was proficient in the principles of spacetime. He was definitely the best at using the principles of spacetime in the divine beginning realm. With such high attainments in spacetime, the life-saving token he refined contained special spacetime techniques. Although it did not have the ability to attack, it was definitely enough to save his life. Even if a master-level expert from the outside world arrived, Jian Wushuang could still escape with this token, let alone the fact that a master-level expert from the outside world had yet to arrive at the divine beginning realm. Therefore, the Temple Master did not show any fear even though he knew that the 3 saint realms were backed by the power of the will of heaven. He also knew that the power of the will of heaven could possibly allow a master-level expert from the outside world to arrive at the divine beginning realm. He dared to protect Jian Wushuang's real trump card. In the divine beginning realm, although Temporal Temple Master could not be said to be truly invincible, no one could stop him if he wanted to leave. Upon hearing the words of the Temple Master and looking at the token in his hand, Jian Wushuang was not only pleasantly surprised, but also flattered. At this moment, the hearts of the principal's masters were also surging. The temple master has personally refined 2 life-saving tokens. As far as I know, the temple master has refined 2 of them before. One of them has been used a long time ago, and the other one is left in the temporal temple in case anything happens. The temple master has also warned us not to use this token unless the temporal temple is in a life or death situation. It's like this. One of the tokens Lord Temple Master refined was used as one of our trump cards. But now Lord Temple Master has refined one for Heavenly Sword Marquis. Previously, he asked Heavenly Sword Marquis to cultivate by his side for 300 years, and then appointed him as an inspector. Now he has given him a life-saving token. I'm afraid even Lord Temple Master's personal disciple won't be able to get this treatment. Temple Master, aren't you favoring Heavenly Sword Marquis too much? Many principals masters present thought that Temporal Temple Master was favoring Jian Wushuang too much. That was great. Indeed, Temporal Temple Master had been teaching Jian Wushuang since he returned to the Divine Beginning Realm. Now that he was going to the universe battlefield, he also left some trump cards for Jian Wushuang. Just like Temporal Temple Master's return, it was purely for Jian Wushuang's return. Heavenly Sword Marquis, remember, the token I'm giving you now is extremely difficult to refine. I can only give you this one token at most to save your life. If you use it, there won't be a second one. So, unless it's a life or death situation, don't use this token easily. Temporal Temple Master specially warned. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded immediately. Oh, one more thing, Temporal Temple Master said. He flipped his palm and a purple-gold command flag, which was emitting dense space-time power, appeared in his hand. When I left the Saha Island, I brought this heavenly golden flag back. It's a top-tier treasure in space-time and has great power. I used it many times when I was adventuring in the universe battlefield. However, I already have a golden sky painting flag, so it's useless now. Now I'll give this golden sky painting flag to you. I hope you can use its power as soon as possible. With that, Temporal Temple Master waved his hand and threw the golden sky painting flag to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took it, but his mind was in a daze. He was surprised by Temporal Temple Master's arrangement today. First, he appointed Jian Wushuang as an inspector, gave him a life-saving command talisman, and now he gave him the golden banner that he had gotten from Green Rock Master on Saha Island. It was equivalent to completely spoiling Jian Wushuang. Of course, Jian Wushuang was flattered. The surrounding principals masters looked at Jian Wushuang with completely changed expressions. Although they had seen Temporal Temple Master's preference for Jian Wushuang, they had only felt a little bit of emotion. Now that Temporal Temple Master had given him the heavenly golden banner, these principals masters could no longer calm down. They were more or less envious, even jealous. Yes, when a person who was just a little kid in their eyes had suddenly become their equal, or even higher than them, and had obtained all kinds of resources and treasures that drove them crazy, of course they would be jealous. Jian Wushuang also saw all of this jealousy. He looked at the temple master and saw the faint smile on his face. Jian Wushuang immediately understood. The temple master has lived for so many years, and he has always been watertight in dealing with things. He should have known that if he gave me the life-saving talisman and the golden banner in front of so many people, it would definitely attract the jealousy of others. It would bring me a lot of trouble in my future position as an inspector, but the temple master still did it. Jian Wushuang understood. In fact, Temporal Temple Master could have given him the life-saving command talisman and the golden sky painting flag. After all, he had been cultivating by Temporal Temple Master's side and had had opportunities, but Temporal Temple Master did not give them to him back then, but now he had given them to him in front of so many people. Jian Wushuang could guess the meaning behind it. Temple Master wants to train me. He doesn't mind giving me more obstacles in the temporal temple. If I can't even pass this small obstacle, how can I compete with the 3 Saint Realms in the future? Not to mention that I might face a ruler-level expert from the outside world in the future. Jian Wushuang murmured, but at the same time he had questions. Because under normal circumstances, to make things difficult for the younger generation, or even to deliberately arrange some obstacles to temper the other party, this kind of behavior, usually only in the training of their own successors. That's why I did it. Is the temporal master doing this to train him to be the next temporal master? Maybe it's possible, Jian Wushuang thought. He knew that the divine beginning realm was no longer attractive to the temporal temple master. The reason why the temporal temple master came back every once in a while was because he was worried about the temporal temple. After all, the temporal temple had a deep foundation. However, there were too few experts. Once they lacked a master-level battle strength like him, it would be difficult to guarantee their safety. Take the battle on Saha Island as an example. If Temporal Temple Master had not arrived in time, the outcome of that battle would have been quite tragic. Because of this, Temporal Temple Master had never ventured into the deepest part of the universe battlefield. Actually, with his strength, he could have gone to the central region of the universe. That place was the paradise for experts like him. Under this premise, if he could cultivate an heir with the strength of a ruler who was qualified to intimidate hundreds of millions of experts in the divine beginning realm, he would not have any worries and could go to the depths of the universe directly. He could even go for tens of millions of years without coming back. Because as long as there was a ruler, the temporal temple could ensure his safety. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and felt bitter. Well, I've told you what I need to tell you. I'll leave the temporal temple to you. Ha ha! The laughter of the temporal temple master echoed in the temple. He slowly disappeared from everyone's sight and soon disappeared completely. Farewell, Temple Master. Many experts in the hall respectfully sent Temple Master off. After Temple Master disappeared completely. All right, everyone, Temple Master has already left for the universe battlefield, and our space-time shrine is still the same as before. Everyone, carry out your duties and leave. Palace Master Bai Xing waved his hand. Then he said, Bat Song, Heavenly Sword Marquis, you two stay here. The experts in the temple left one after another. When they left, they glanced at Jian Wushuang a few more times, with strange emotions in their eyes. Soon, only Jian Wushuang, Temple Master Bai Xing, and Bat Song were left in the temple. Heavenly Sword Marquis, congratulations on becoming the 6th inspector of our temporal temple. You also received the life-saving token and the golden sky painting flag from Temple Master. Temple Master Bai Xing looked at Jian Wushuang with a smile. Heavenly Sword Marquis, you are really lucky to be valued so much by the Temple Master. He even gave you a life-saving token and a golden sky painting flag. To be honest, even I am envious of these two things. Bat Song also smiled. You too. Don't you see that the Temple Master seems to have other intentions? Jian Wushuang asked. Of course. Bat Song nodded. It's possible that the Temple Master wants to groom you as his successor. Of course, he may have other motives. As for why, I can't figure it out, Temple Master Bai Xing said. Yes, the Temple Master has always been unpredictable. Now that he deliberately gave you the life-saving command talisman and the heavenly golden banner in front of so many people, he must have his own plans. But these plans shouldn't be bad for you, Bat Song added. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang could only shrug his shoulders helplessly. Bat Song, you are the supervisor of the temporal temple, and Heavenly Sword Marquis is now your direct subordinate. Tell him something about the supervisor first, Temple Master Bai Xing said. Okay. Bat Song nodded slightly and looked at Jian Wushuang. The inspector has a very high position in the temporal temple and is responsible for external battles. Under normal circumstances, it should be an expert of the Void Fourth Realm, or at least the Void Third Realm. However, Heavenly Sword Marquis, although you are only an immortal saint, your strength has long reached the Void Third Realm. In addition, you have been cultivating with the Temple Master for 300 years. Even the Temple Master himself said that your strength is not a problem, so it's definitely not a problem. In addition to the position of inspector, there is also a patrol team. Patrol team Jian Wushuang was stunned. The patrol team is directly under the command of the inspector and fights with him. After all, in the divine beginning realm, although our temporal temple is aloof from worldly affairs, we often fight with some big forces and experts. Once a fight breaks out, the inspector alone will not be enough. We need a large number of experts. A patrol squad consists of 10 principals masters from the second to the first realm of the Void Realm and 100 top-notch immortal saints, Batsong said. 10 principals masters and 100 top-notch immortal saints? Jian Wushuang was intrigued. This squad could be considered very powerful in the Divine Beginning Realm. In the Divine Beginning Realm, only first-rate forces could have such a squad of experts. However, for the Temporal Temple, this squad.T was just one of the patrol squads that were usually responsible for battles. One person can lead 10 principals masters and hundreds of immortal saints to battle outside. It's no wonder that the position of the patrol envoy is very high and that he's very powerful, Jian Wushuang thought. Our Temporal Temple has only had 5 patrol envoys before, so naturally we only have 5 patrol squads. Now that you've become the 6th patrol envoy, our Temporal Temple naturally has to arrange a patrol squad for you. However, this patrol squad needs a lot of experts. Even our Temporal Temple will need some time to gather them for you, Batsong said. There's no hurry. I'm just curious. Are all the people in the patrol team members of the Temporal Temple? Jian Wushuang asked. Of course not. Batsong shook his head with a smile. Heavenly Sword Marquis. It's not like you haven't entered the Divine Hall of the Temporal Temple before. The divine seats of the experts of the Temporal Temple are all there. In total, there are only about 1,000 people. How can there be so many experts in the patrol team? After all, a patrol team needs 100 peak saints, not to mention principals masters. 6 patrol teams make up 600 peak saints. Most of the experts in the patrol team are rule masters, but the peak saints are experts recruited by the Temporal Temple in the Divine Beginning Realm. We pay them and they fight for us. Is that so? Jian Wushuang thought for a moment and asked, Master Batsong, how long will it take to gather the patrol team? Under normal circumstances, we can gather a complete patrol team within 100 years, Batsong said. That's good. I've been improving my understanding of the principles of time and space with the Temple Master for 300 years, but I rarely have the opportunity to go to the Temporal Temple. Now that the Temple Master has left, I can go to the Temporal Temple to cultivate during the 100 years that the patrol team has been established, Jian Wushuang said. No problem. You can cultivate by yourself. When the patrol team is established, I'll send a message to you. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of cultivation. Anyway, we don't have many opportunities to use the patrol team. You can ask them to wait for you as long as they don't wait too long, Batsong said. I understand, Jian Wushuang nodded. Soon, Jian Wushuang left the temple and went straight to the Principal's Temple. In the Principal's Temple, where the 2 principles of spacetime and reincarnation had fused, Jian Wushuang sat down alone in the center of the temple. He took a deep breath, looked around, and sensed that the 2 principles of spacetime and reincarnation had slowly fused together. The Principal's Temple. I've been here a few times in the past 300 years and made a lot of progress. However, I've only stepped into the threshold of fusing the principles of spacetime and reincarnation. I only know how to fuse them, but I still need a lot of time to fully fuse them. In the Temporal Temple, I'll need a lot less time. If I'm not mistaken, in about 100 years, I should be able to perfectly merge the spacetime principles and the samsara principles. Let's begin. Jian Wushuang immediately fell silent in the fusion of the 2 principles.